Things spiraled out of control faster than Yuta ever imagined. He never guessed his very first time would turn out like this. Yuta finally blasted his way to the very top of Ogre Island's mountain. That place sat in northern Japan, and he just kept staring at the breathtaking view until someone snapped his name and called him over. His childhood friend showed up grinning ear to ear, proudly rocking her brand new cosplay. This time you could tell she'd thrown her whole heart into it, and when the results hit, she was over the moon. Her name was Waguri Masaki, and she didn't just cosplay, she owned the stage. Yuta snapped the camera into place, and the photo session kicked off. Sometimes it was brutal to hold his cool while his cosplay friend kept pushing his buttons like. After what felt like forever, she finally ripped off the old outfit and slipped into a whole new one. The second he brought up the anime event, her eyes lit up instantly, because she'd never been to one before. She dreamed of going for ages, but life in the countryside kept slamming the door in her face. And the whole city was in total chaos, with traffic lights going off like they couldn't agree on anything. But she couldn't wrap her head around why that would be dangerous, and on that island there was just one lone traffic light, installed purely to teach people how to follow the rules. In those cases, ignoring it was pointless. Masaki just pulled a ridiculous face. He ignored the light altogether because this was a city where traffic never showed up. But in the city, you couldn't mess around, you had to stay sharp and keep your eyes wide open. Shoot your eyes up, those lights are calling. For someone from AOGA, this is brutal, so she needs to quit for good. Still, she wouldn't back down, because if they wanted to leave, they'd need cash first. Since the bills for food had to be covered for. And transportation got so messy that it made everything a real struggle. Alright, if that was really the case, she could snag herself a part-time job. And just the thought of it lit Masaki up with excitement, so the two kept heading down the mountain together, calm as can be, talking the whole way. Until Masaki finally leaned in and asked if Yuta wanted to pack up and leave the island. He paused, weighed his options, and said he'd maybe leave someday, but then something pulled the brakes on his plans. The moment he imagined walking away from that landscape, his heart sank like it was losing a piece of itself. Masaki said she felt this island had magic in the air, and honestly, how awesome would it be if elves lived here too? Maybe in their world magic is a death trap, but in ours it could be different. Imagine getting summoned as a beast and calling it fate. Misaki blurted out a laugh just thinking about it, while Yuta stared at the thought, realizing how insanely lucky he was to have her in his life. Then the girl blurted a question about his soul, right out of nowhere. He hefted the sword and said it was almost ready, just one more detail, and Masaki beamed like crazy because her friend always crushed the props. He kept talking until the sunset hit, and then next. Today, Yuta just wrapped up a job for Mrs. Tanaka. The second he rounded the corner, boom, he collided with someone he knew, and his surprise hit like lightning. It was Masaki's older sister, Wadagiri Momoka. He crouched down to speak to her anyway, even though, with a build like hers, one bad moment of stress could have him looking at a walking warning sign. They kept talking for a bit, and then she leaned in and asked him if he wanted to go for a ride. The second he laid eyes on the state of the car, saying yes felt like a mistake the second it left his mouth. He dove inside, basically praying he'd make it, and then, bam, he ran straight into Misaki, who looked like she was ready to jump in too. Momoka snatched the moment and told them both to buckle up because they were gonna need it. The moment they hit the coast, Yuta blurted out that he'd really been expecting some kind of dream to yank him into an ice sky. Good news, everyone was alive and okay. Now it was time to ditch the old clothes and jump in for a dip. You shut your eyes in embarrassment, then the moment you opened them, you got slammed with the sight of a swimsuit. He froze, then awkwardly snapped his gaze away. Masaki nudged him along and teased, so, wanna see a totally different kind of swimwear? Yuta snapped at her, but she was riding such a high that she didn't even hear him. Then she threw out a special pose like it was nothing, and he tried his best to ignore it, while Masaki kept pressing his limits every chance she got. The sword was almost finished, and she couldn't deny it. This thing was stunning, on a whole other level, powerful enough to even take down a dragon. After a couple of hard dives, she popped up to check in and see exactly how the project was coming along. Everything was lining up perfectly, so she pulled Yuta aside and invited him over for dinner at her place. Her father's smile vanished the moment he didn't show up. He agreed, but a heavy worry settled in, staring off as he wondered what kind of life he'd have lived if his father hadn't been taken. That day they tore into the fight, and Yuta bolted, running straight out of home. Suddenly the wind shifted, and he felt it hit him like a warning. Then he glanced at the clock, and his stomach dropped as he realized the night was slipping away. So he shot up, ready to head back. Then out of nowhere, fog rolled in and swallowed the whole mountain in an instant. And then Yuta heard a woman scream, and the moment it hit the two, they accidentally collided, and when he looked up, he immediately spotted something that didn't belong. The girl's elf ears stuck out for everyone to see. He asked her if she was a foreign cosplayer, and she just stared back like, "Cosplay, what is that?" Yuta asks if that was her screaming earlier, and it clicks. She remembers she was running, so she grabs him and drags him with her. He's left feeling awkward, totally clueless about what's happening. Right before his eyes, a sudden image snaps into place, and a giant monster is still barreling toward them. It had to be a joke. Utah was convinced of it. The two sprinted even deeper into the dark, twisting forest. The dragon noses them out instantly, then rips into a bone-chilling growl. Crouching behind a rock, staying out of sight, Utah can't stop thinking, were they still being followed? She tells him be quiet, but he ignores her and keeps going. He was shocked. He'd never seen her before, and her Japanese was so good it basically caught him off guard. Then she drops the bombshell. She used a communication magic so she could understand other languages, and it completely fries Yuta's brain into total confusion. Then the girl steps up and declares herself. She's Exilia Lilgardo, and you can tell she's clocked one thing instantly: he's not from this world. Otherwise, he would have spotted the dragon right away, and he never would have missed her. He starts parroting every word she says, and it's so impossible it makes his whole reality feel like it's cracking. But she asks if Utah never spotted that dragon from earlier. Yeah, he had, and there's no way that thing belonged in his world. Exilia snaps her attention to something out of nowhere, and she lights up the second she spots the sword strapped to his back. Before Utah could even explain it was just a cosplay sword, she pushed closer and demanded he be her knight. The boy's totally thrown off, but Exilia grins and tells him she knew he'd pull it off. Trying to dodge it, he blurts that he's just a high school kid, and this time she's the one who gets mixed up, thinking it's the name of some guild. And just like that, he pivots the conversation and introduces himself too. He blurts that they have to get out of there now because there's no way they can fight that monster. But as they kept moving, he realized the elf beside him was trembling like she was terrified. So he grabs her hand and squeezes it tight, trying to pull her back from the edge. Right then, a dragon crashes into the scene. The girl strides up and orders Utah to bolt right now. But when the dragon locks its gaze on him, he won't back down. He insists he'll stay close, pull the dragon's attention away, and be the hold up. He bolts off the moment it clicks, and yeah, just like you figured. The monster lunges straight for him, closing the gap in a heartbeat. Sheared his way forward, then his grin froze, because the dragon snapped its focus to him. Out of nowhere, it whips around and starts marching off in a whole new direction. That road was the only doorway to the village. Right then, every face of his family and friends crashes into his mind like a wave. And when the beast comes for him, he has to chase it down, because the only way to survive is to find a way to stop it. The moon blazed overhead, and right as the creature started to at the edge of the cliff, it snarled so loud the whole place shook. Utah finally caught up, and even with the odds stacked against him, fear raged in his chest, but he held that hero pose steady, because the dragon charged straight at him, and the boy could only pray his plan actually worked. With spray varnish in hand and a lighter flicking, he ignites the creature, straight up flames. Almost every cosplay prop material they used could catch fire, and that was the exact spark that planted the whole idea. Using varnish to finish the pieces was normal, but it was also insanely flammable, so he had to be super careful. Suddenly, Exilia snaps his focus on, right when the moment is about to slip away. Sadly, those dragons laughed at fire, so this trick alone wouldn't cut it. The moment she finishes her words, the monster snuffs out the flames like it never even happened. Utah had already locked in, because even with an agile opponent, he just needed to land that spray right where it counted. He could finally carve out a window of time for himself and the elf. He grips the spray tight and fires it up as the monster closes in. The glue lands dead on, right in their eyes. Snatching the moment, the creature was stunned and dazed. He yanks the sword off his back and snaps into attack mode. He copies the anime moves and unleashes Excalibur, slamming it straight at the tiny spot on the dragon's tail. The monster wobbles, loses its balance, and tumbles straight off the cliff. Yuta couldn't believe it. Somehow his plan actually worked. He flings himself onto the ground and screams to Exilia that it worked, that he actually did it, only for her to shake with pure nerves. But the moment she hears Yuta's voice, shock hits her hard, then both of them surge toward each other. Exilia was absolutely wrecked with emotion. Her heart was on fire, and it was only getting worse. It felt like, right beside the island he'd always known, a whole new world suddenly burst into existence. They all gathered right at the foot of the cliff. Exiled wouldn't stop raving about how unbelievably incredible he was. She stared in shock at the spell because he didn't cast a single one, he just used chemistry, mixing the right elements to make it happen. And she hears that, her eyes go wide with shock because she thought he was talking about the 4 basic elements, but it was way off, so off that even he froze in shock, learning elves were real. Exilea's cheeks flush with embarrassment. She's not an elf after all, and Yuta freezes, staring like, wait, did I mess up? And she drops the bombshell, she's part elf and part human. And it slams into him out of nowhere, totally catching him off guard. Because that meant she really was part of it. Elf kept trying to defend herself, insisting she wasn't either one or the other. And he's stunned because it turns out he barely cared at all. In his mind, she's just an elf and nothing else matters. But there had to be more people out there who wanted her, no matter what blood ran in their veins. Exiled stands there like royalty, then curiosity gets the better of him and he ends up touching her ears. Surprising her out of nowhere shocked her completely, because that was the one weak spot elves never saw coming. And the moment it clicks what he's done, he reels back, blurts out an apology, yeah, well. Alright, it was finally time to head back to the city. Exiled was dying to introduce him to her mother. Then they rush into the castle, and the second they cross the threshold, you're left wondering if this is real, or if he's trapped in a dream that'll vanish the moment he wakes. And the elf shoots back, nope, using magic, I shifted my entire country to a Hoga. He's in complete shock because he never imagined it was an entire peninsula. But yeah, they're here now, so they can worry about all this later. The moment they step inside, Utah's senses scream, something S in the room. An elf knight barreled toward him with a hostile glare that screamed, don't move. He lifts his backpack like a shield, bracing for whatever hits next. Snapping his guard up at the exact split second, the attack came slamming in. The girl's irritation practically hissed off her as soon as he approached the princess, and let's be real, she already seemed ready to tear his head right off. Exiled shoots Ververine a sharp look and demands he stop. And he tells her, I saved you from a vicious dragon, because she's only alive thanks to his brave defense. Ververine can't believe it at first, but almost immediately, embarrassment slams into her when she realizes what she's just done. She's ready to throw her life away as an apology, but Utah lunges in and desperately stops her. With his apologies finally accepted, she snaps back to normal like nothing happened. Beverine L. Cross steps in and introduces herself, saying she's been caring for the princess since she was little. Yuta swallows hard because that sounds like trouble and she's definitely no joke. But as she kept bragging about everything she'd done, he finally snapped and told her to stop. Exiled says Ververine's family has been serving her for years, so if they ever needed anything, they only had to call. Alright, they waste no time and charge straight into the queen's chambers. After all that, they trade tearful goodbyes and then finally, the two sprint straight to the queen's room. Isabella Lilgardo, the queen of the land, grabs the young man by the heart and pours out her gratitude for saving her daughter. Because that crossing drained her dry, Exilea's daughter just became the new lord, and Yuta is stunned because he swore Exilea's father was the one in charge. Only when she was little did her father die, and that's all she lost. Utah apologizes and tells her, I get it, because he's lived the same kind of pain. He leans in and demands to know, is the queen all right? And she drops the bombshell that the teleportation magic costs her life, she traded away pieces of it. So yeah, this is why she turned out the way she did it to save her own people. Once she married that human and he died, Lilgard became the first target, and they started attacking Lilgard right away. And back then it totally made sense, Exiled was half-elf. For years they went all out every single day, fighting tooth and nail to shield that kingdom and everyone trapped inside it. But the Seho Empire was downright extreme, no question about it. And that's exactly why they went after Lilgard, terrified of what that mix could unleash. She tells him to step right up to the window, and the second Yuta closes the distance, surprise hits him like a punch. Then he stumbles on a column of magic. That was their lifeline to the other world, yet with her magic sealed, she couldn't finish the separation. When she was younger, they seized her and dragged her into slavery, and she couldn't get her hands on the keys to the shackles. Those chains crushed her magic, she couldn't unleash it all. Back then, her husband had saved her, but the shackles still wouldn't budge. So that restriction spell stayed locked on, still active and nowhere near letting up. Utah spun his gaze over the paintings, searching for the one opening if he could finally free. With those chains broken, her power would snap back to her, so he demands the truth and the queen nods yes. She wasn't getting every last bit of her magic back, but she did reclaim a solid chunk of it. He steps in, checks the shackles up close, and mutters that he might be able to rip them apart. Even with all that thickness, there was still a gap between them and the queen's ankle, so he could slide in and use the cutter he'd brought. But even with the boy's grit staring her in the face, she still didn't feel all that confident. Exiled strides up and begs him to trust her, because she saved him from a dragon, and that has to mean something, right? Isabella hesitates for a moment, then decides to trust him, because her daughter was begging her to. Minutes dragged by, then snap, the chains gave way, and the queen and princess just froze in total, stunned disbelief. Isabella even asks what that thing was, but the guy shrugs it off as nothing more than a plain old cutting pliers. She loved the name, say it out loud, and it instantly felt intriguing, like it promised something big. And Exiled breaks in and gushes about how incredible Utah is. He even helped her mom claw her power back, and when he started hearing those sweet compliments and heartfelt thanks, Yuta couldn't help but feel a little awkward. Then the princess slips up to her mother and murmurs a secret right into her ear. That's how it all spirals. Isabella corners him and begs him to spend the night at the castle. Happy again, she yanks him into a tight hug, and it wouldn't be a problem at all if he would just stay the night. Right, with her asking like that, there was literally no way Utah could say no. That night, he sank deep into his thoughts in his room, munching food that just didn't sit right with him, and to make it worse, his phone had zero signal. He couldn't stop wondering if Misaki was safe and okay. Exiled bursts into his room. Right as he's thrown off guard, a girl slides into the seat beside him, and the nerves in her eyes give away. She's just as scared. He had to tell him something. She was bursting with joy. After all, her husband was an absolute legend, yet the second he heard the word husband, he froze like someone hit pause on his soul. Right before he could even answer, Exiled shoots in and wraps him in a tight hug. That girl had absolutely zero clue just how massive her front commission actually was. And because of that, Yuta's brain was scrambling, firing the wrong synapses as it tried to figure it all out. The second she says she'll be his wife, Yuta snaps his fingers and tells her to wait just a moment. So what was she really trying to say with that? He made his move, asked for her hand in marriage, and she said yes. Then she shrugs and calls it simple. He said he was making his move, and she said yes, because if you touch an elf's ear, you're basically asking for their hand in marriage. In that instant, panic hit him and he blurted out apologies. Then the girl stared and demanded, "So what do we do now?" "What? What do you mean, do?" He's not getting it at all, and Exiled lights up and blurts out that as his wife, she'll give it her all. The realization finally slams into him, but before he can spiral, he demands to know, does she even know how babies are made? When she can't answer, panic detonates in his chest. She knew nothing about carnal stuff, because honestly, she was surrounded by women all day. But he couldn't bring himself to do that to someone who didn't even know how it worked. So he flips the script and tells them, let's slow down first, we get to know each other a bit, like it's the only move that matters. Before she even finished saying it wasn't needed, her mom had already given the green light. Utah finally gets it, there's no room for common sense here, so now he has to figure out how to break things off with her. Trying to quiet the panic hammering in his chest. And they tell you to breathe, because they swear they never could marry. In that exact moment, Exilea's joy evaporates and she blurts out, "So, Utah didn't like me, did he?" He broke down and started crying right in front of him. Yuta had never faced a girl in tears, so he was totally lost until he starts blurting out, "It wasn't like that at all," and tries to explain. Exiled leans in and asks him straight up, does he like her or not? He blurts out yes, he's into her, and right in that beat, the elf snaps back to life, promising she'll give it everything. And would throw her whole heart into her husband, body and soul, no holding back. She leans in for a kiss, and Yuta immediately shoves her back. But somehow, his hands ended up in places they had no business being. He starts to spiral out of control, and Exilea's eyes widen in shock. It felt weird at first, but once he touched her like that, she couldn't stop enjoying it. She just wanted to get closer, but Utah totally crumples, breaks down, and faints cold in the middle of it. Ververen races in any moment now to save the princess. The very next morning, he jolts awake in a panic, and Exiled is there, greeting him with a smile. He was absolutely wrecked, he'd completely blacked out. In that exact moment, happiness hit him, because it finally meant they hadn't done a thing. But as soon as she walks up and declares, "We're a couple now," Utah's brain just freezes. Suddenly, Ververen hammers on the door and blurts, "So, are you ready?" Outside the castle, he locks eyes on Masaki sprinting straight toward him. The second the girl spots him, she rockets ahead and wraps him in a tight, tearful hug. His sudden disappearance freaked her out, and Yuta rushes in to apologize. And Masaki wraps him in another tight hug, grinning like crazy because he's finally okay. Right after that, Momoka shows up, looking dead worried, and it totally catches them off guard. Exilia's face tightens with worry and she can't help but wonder, were those women his wives too? Maybe it was an accident, but Masaki's eyes light up the second she sees the start of a polygamous mess, because she's right in it. She's insanely perfect and super cute, so the girl blurts it out, totally freaking out in the moment. You need to beg her to calm down, and that's when Momoka steps in. Watching her sister's bad behavior, she snaps her hand out and gives her a sharp little smack. Acting like that right now wouldn't do a single thing to fix this. Momoka yells for Yuta, and the moment he hears it, you can feel something about to go down. He demanded to know whether he even understood what was going down in that kingdom. He breaks it down for her, and when Misaki hears Exilia's name, shock slams into her like lightning. Momoka was a half-elf, but the worry on her face said this was no simple mess, so she turned around and headed back to the office to report exactly what happened. It all spiraled until Exilia lunged in and cut it off cold. Yuta was her husband now, so he couldn't even think about leaving Lilgard. They freeze when they hear the word husband, like the universe just dropped a bomb. And the more she talked, the more tangled everything became for Yuta. In moments like this, his mother's words hit him hard: stay strong, don't break. Masaki's fury exploded, pure blazing rage. While they were scrambling to find him, he was out there chatting up an elf. Yuta suddenly realizes exactly what's going on and begs them, please, let me explain what really happened. And after all that, Misaki finally gets it. It all clicked. He wasn't the kind of guy who'd lay a hand on a defenseless girl. But he had to turn back even though Misaki swore it was wrong to leave that elf behind. Still, he admits she's right and Misaki thanks him. Now she'd basically end up with a cosplay duo, no matter if she meant to or not. She keeps needling him about that girl and Yuta snaps, begging her to stop. Until Masaki finally grinds to a halt and comes in close. She had to know, was he truly set on sticking around for Lilgard, or was he just pretending? Yuta shoots back, nope, I'm not doing that. Leaga wasn't just where he lived, it was the only home he'd ever known. So yeah, he'd better talk to the elf right away. Yuta whips her gaze to her. Masaki says that in moments like this, the only move that matters is staying crystal clear. Then he heads to Exilia, and the moment she sees him back, her whole face lights up with pure joy. Yuta cuts straight to the chase and tells them, I need to go home, I don't belong to that kingdom. Exilia slams on the brakes, totally blindsided. Seeing the girl's reaction, Misaki strides up and declares that Yuta has been part of her family all along. But the more they kept talking, the more that Elf's hope crumbled into pure desolation. Not until she finally breaks her silence, then she shuts the whole thing down for good. If Yuta was going to bail, she'd bolt with him, no questions asked. Nobody in that room saw that twist coming. Meanwhile, in Tokyo, they were huddling in a meeting room, blazing with plans to map out this brand new territory. This wasn't some one-time freak incident. Again and again, they had to hit the field and collect data. And the winner of the choice was Yumari. They were practically vibrating with curiosity, dying to find out what secrets that territory was hiding. Birds were tearing into song, while Yuta was still dead to the world. And he feels something soft brush his head. He jerks awake, heart pounding, hands snapping up in shock. Noticing Exilia conked out and sleeping right beside him. She bolts upright, still feeling his reaction in the air, and they both grin and yell, good morning. Yuta blurts out, why were you sleeping here? And she insists that being his wife means it's only natural for them to sleep together. He stumbled through the request and begged her to leave, but she just wouldn't, she refused to go. But Yuta desperately needed to change clothes, and the worst part, he couldn't bring himself to do it in front of her. She drops her guard and then goes to unbutton her own clothes, but her hands just can't finish the job. Exilia dials Ververine, and the next second, he pops out from inside the closet like he's been hiding there the whole time. Yuta was at the end of his rope, he never saw that elf showing up there. Exilia then grabs her friend's attention and begs her to help unbutton her clothes, because she can't do it herself. And just like that, the maid starts working, and before long, she's helping her mistress like it's nothing, while Yuta is left squirming in total discomfort the entire time. Vervorine doesn't just warn him, she threatens him straight to his face. So he chooses to walk away, because risking his life isn't a gamble he's willing to take. He slumps on the floor, praying that the next morning will finally be calmer. After a while, he finally manages to shift course and bolts down the stairs. Masaki pops up with a bright good morning, and the way she's staring over breakfast tells me she's been cooking for ages. He grills her about Momoka, and she admits she had to bail early that very day. After all, a princess from a foreign kingdom had somehow landed here, so everyone had to step up and protect her like she was priceless. Yuta blurts out, "I'm starving," because he hasn't so much as taken a bite since the day before. Masaki then tells her, "I already cooked rice and fish for you." Berverine and Exilia burst into the kitchen, grinning as they say the food smells absolutely incredible. His buddy lights up the second he sees another elf. Yuta blurts out that she was Exilia's maid. And Masaki wastes no time, he darts in and tries to win her over fast. Because she was a knight, she demanded the girl put on the scene for her. But Yuta snaps at her because she's no doll, and he makes that crystal clear. Everyone piles into the breakfast table and Exilia tries to play it cool, but the second she opens her mouth, her stomach growls like it's starving, leaving her so mortified she couldn't even look up. Yuta leans in and tells her, "Don't stress, eat as much as you want." Masaki hustles to set a steaming bowl of rice in front of her. The table was set to perfection, like someone was about to kick off a game-changing moment. The moment she takes that bite of rice and slips it into her mouth, boom, everything changes. Her tiny eyes spark with pure joy. As she leans in at the table, the room tenses, she drops a bombshell. She's never tasted anything this delicious. Masaki insists it's just rice, but those two elves are absolutely loving every bite. Yuta told her to slow down and chew or she'd end up sick, but Exilia was absolutely feral for that food, scarfing it down like a mission. Right then she snaps at him, he's wrong, she's not getting sick, not for a second. She couldn't shake the feeling that Yuta's other wife was trying to charm her straight into liking her, with that mouth-watering food. Right then Misaki and Yuta stare straight at her, and that girl breaks into laughter. She beamed when Xalia dug into her food and praised it like it was pure magic, the elf. He's buzzing with happiness and Yuta's shocked, turns out he wasn't the only one dying of hunger. To his delight, these two were getting along like they'd known each other forever. Masaki catches on that he skipped the vegetables and snaps, "Eat them or you're not getting seconds." Then he grabs the fish, looks her in the eye, and promises he'll eat the vegetables, right along with her. Exilia watches them closely, and slowly jealousy creeps in, burning hotter with every interaction. At that exact moment, she slams on the. She shuts the table down and tells him, "I'm going home." He blurts out what he did wrong, but the girl just goes silent and won't give him a single answer. Masaki shoots out an apology because of course it made sense, after all, they'd been growing up together. She tells Yuta to think hard about what he did, and for a second, confusion hits him like a wave. But Exilia's sulky face was staring him down. He throws out an apology before he even knows what he's apologizing for. She was still seething, no doubt about it. Misaki snaps his attention and orders him to lock in, pay way more attention. Leaving Yuta left her feeling weirdly awkward, and the moment the topic shifted, she blurted out a comment about it, right there. They hadn't posted a single entry banner, and honestly, he couldn't wrap his head around why. But it was a government order. Exilia's stomach drops with worry while Yuta grabs the moment and tries to calm her down. But the girl blurts out that people from her kingdom are in desperate need of help. Then the boy just stands there, lost, wondering what he can possibly do next. Suddenly, footsteps thunder closer, and they whip around to catch who's coming. Momoka stormed back with a mystery woman trailing right beside her, like she brought the answer to a secret. She shoots out an apology for cutting in, then launches into her name and who she is. He flashes the card and declares, "I'm Yumari Mew, Minister of International Relations, handling the world's biggest ties from behind a closed door." She breaks it down for them, plain and simple, and shows exactly how her job runs day to day. And trust me, there was a damn good reason she ended up there. Staring at Yuta, Miyu grins and tells him she's got a job lined up for him. Something kept under wraps, the kind of secret only he. From the notes she had in front of her, he wasn't just a civilian, he had details that changed everything. Also happened to be the owner of the Ogasawara family's lands. So she demanded he rise up and seize control, becoming the lord of that whole region. Yuta is left reeling, there's no way he's supposed to be lord of anything. In the end, it all came down to this, the land belonged to Isabella and Exilia. But the elf's face twists with total confusion, because yeah, he's already the lord of the kingdom, and when he insists he doesn't remember any of it, she shoots back that he and she were married. Or did he still stubbornly refuse to like her? Her sadness crushed him, and it dragged him deeper into despair. Mew jumps into the conversation and flat out says, "If I didn't take that role, there's no way anyone could have helped." Against his wishes, he finally relents, and admits he'll take the mantle as the Lord of Lilgard. With a bright grin, Exilia throws her arms around him and pours out her thanks like it's the happiest moment of her life. But one burning question kept clawing at him about his studies. And Miyu tells him, "Don't stress, she's stepping in as the intern herself." But that one comment throws all three of them into utter confusion. Momoka then leans in and tells him the truth. He's not just talking, he's planning to study how to work in that place. Because it was really part of his education, he got to leave school and Utah finally exhaled. He could keep studying after all. First things first, she had to figure out what was going on in Lilgard right now. Mew pleads for Exilia's help and the princess lights up, ready to jump in and assist right away. They thunder across the land on horseback, racing straight for the kingdom. And Yuta can't help but get a little shy, because Exilia is sitting right there, mounted in front of him. He clocks that something feels off, then leans in and asks if you're really enjoying the sights of Lilgard. Utah says yes, but the real story is he's been locked in, watching something else unfold like a whole different world. Normally, he'd grab the front seat, but if he did, the elf would lose sight of him. He spins back and asks him if he's cold. And the young man shoots back, "No way, I'm seriously hot, like for real." Relief floods her and the two keep going, riding off in the distance. He spots workers toiling away in the fields, right in front of him. People were freaking out about how insanely thin they looked. Exilia then spits out the truth. Lilgard is a lousy land and they're forced to cough up piles of taxes to their neighbors just to stay protected. Yuta is thrown off, then he watches the kids at play and realizes just how brutal life must be for them. They rush back to the city. Masaki asked how the trip went and Yuta snapped back, "Honestly, it was not very good." This leaves Exilia fuming, then Mew jumps in, insisting the boy actually meant the complete opposite. With everything falling apart, it was totally expected that her country would be in rough shape. So yeah, they had to take action, no excuses, no time to waste. He snatches a pin and starts chalking across the board as everyone else just stares. Food security, clean sanitation, and the urgent work of replanting what was lost. These three goals were the only way to claw the kingdom back. Utah says the first move is simple, keep the residents fed, but the moment the population crashes, keeping those fields growing turns into a brutal struggle. Could he really run a whole city from another world like, somehow? That's the question burning in his head. Mew snapped her gaze toward them, pulling everyone's focus. They had to sit down and map out exactly how they'd stock up the supplies for Lilgard. She calls Exilia up and demands to know exactly how much food the castle has stocked. And the princess snaps that they've got wood only for the fireplaces now. Utah's mind instantly races. Did he trigger the stock to drain out so fast? Exilia swears it wasn't that dinner's fault, but the look on her face screamed the truth. Was that girl been quietly starving herself this whole time, hiding every hungry craving like a secret? And that dinner ended up being her final meal. He asked straight up if there was a way to stretch government money to get food. But the moment I say no, you realize the national government is split down the middle, so they don't even have the support they think they do. Utah leaned in and grilled Momoka. Was there any way they could get their hands on the island's funds? But she swears they weren't just fine and dandy. She admits they were stuck in a brutal low point too. The money they could scrape together was usually next to nothing, and even then they stayed right at the absolute limit. Usually this kind of process dragged on for ages, but they demanded a subsidy maybe that would speed everything up, while Mew caught the exact point she wanted to make. And the two of them snap into a debate, tossing around fancy words nobody else even gets, so Exilia cuts in, demanding, how long would it take, more or less? And the second she hears it'll be about a month, panic explodes in her chest. They were weeks away from the dry season. If they couldn't grab enough supplies for the week, everything would fall apart, but the truth was brutal. They had zero food stashed away. Misaki shoots back that yeah, they really did, because they knew enough to ask what her plan was. They've got a few days left, so they can hustle and stack up a seriously solid amount. Utah grabs her and clamps a fierce grip on her shoulders. The guard had to deal with more than 100 residents, and with food running out, there was no way he could feed them all. Then she hits him with a memory back in school, the survival class they took together. In that village, every person kept a secret stash of food just in case disaster ever struck. So yeah, that was probably the whole point. Maybe they could finally use that stock. A few days later, the moment had landed him out in the fields. Rocky slams out the order and demands the workers line up. She whipped up miso soup for everyone, and with just a little, she somehow turned it into a whole meal that left them all grinning with joy. Seeing the plan actually hit its mark, watching it work, made you realize you were finally about to happen. Soon, Exilia shows up with a basket, then he peeks inside and total shock hits him. She tried to whip up a fish pie, and from the look of it, it was downright terrifying. She points it out. Ververine was the one who reeled in the fish. She was trained to catch fish with her bare hands. Both of them were grinning like they'd just pulled off the perfect move. And Exilia insists she gave it everything she had, just like any wife would, standing by Yuta through it all. Band-aids plastered on her hands snap his attention. She'd clearly tried, even if she wasn't used to cooking at all. But he'd have to make that brutal sacrifice. Yuta's throat tightens with terror, and with a shaky lie he claims it smells delicious. Then he swallows hard again, because right as he's about to take that first bite, curiosity wins. Exilia smirks and says, "Yeah, that's just the start," then whips out a whole lineup of fish pies so absurdly terrifying they make your skin crawl. Just a little later, Yuta got absolutely crushed and left completely defeated. But when the princess asks, "Was it good?" he flashes a grin and says, "Yeah," leaving Exilia absolutely over the moon. "So tell me you feel that excited too." The girl grins and promises that next time, she'll bake twice as many pies. And out of nowhere, Yuta sneezes, like a cold just jumped into his body. Fever starts creeping in, and as he staggers, he blurts out something through the heat. Soon, the girls suddenly catch a chilling noise in the distance, and snapped up, realizing Yuta had crumpled and fallen to the ground. It didn't feel like a regular cold at all. He jolts awake at home and throws himself out of bed. Miu had been taking care of him the whole time, and that's what made the worry hit harder as she realized how much time had actually gone by. She sums up what went down, thanks him for looking after her, then quickly shifts gears. "Can I ask you something?" Question: why on earth was she dressed like a nurse? Miu drops her gaze to the outfit she's wearing, and she flat out says it was Masaki's idea, and then drops the real bomb: the outfit was hers. She swallowed her doubts and accepted it only because that girl laid down such solid arguments. Yuta stood there in total shock. Turns out she was even more innocent than he'd ever dared to believe. Right out of nowhere, she plunges her hand into his shirt and checks his temperature. His fever finally broke, but he still needed to stay put and rest. No heroics yet. For now, she wrapped up her job there and moved on. Yuta finally exhales when it's just a cold, because if anything deadlier had shown up, the island would have been slammed into quarantine. He can't stop thinking, what if that happened? Would they even have doctors? "I've got my issues too, but that would be tough, because the country would have to take a stance first." He starts to open his mouth for one last thing, then thinks better of it. Then Miu blurts out that the government still hasn't decided what it's going to do. So the passports got yanked temporarily but hard, and that meant nobody could reach the doctors or even leave that region. Yuta blurts out, "Was it really necessary?" And then, after a long pause, she says, "Yeah, it sounds kind of silly, but trust me, this is dead serious." Like if they issued a temporary passport, that would basically mean, "Yep, we've accepted you as part of this new country." So basically, this protected zone would be ripped out of Japan for good. Because of that, this didn't feel small, it went way deeper. Even with smiles and friendly vibes, they were still a brand new country. And right when Yuta started to talk, the whole situation shifted. Over the last few days, they kept ping-ponging back and forth again and again. So what was the real difference? Miu just quipped, "Good question." Terrifying truth, the government had absolutely no clue what they'd been doing. Yuta jerks back in shock, because that means they've just crossed the line and broken the law. If the government ever came asking, she'd clamp her mouth shut and swear she knew nothing. But that news didn't calm the young man at all. Then, out of nowhere, Misaki and Actilia show up right at his doorstep. They even dressed up as nurses and rushed over to check how he was doing. He quickly blurts out why they're dressed like that, and Misaki's not the kind of girl to be fooled. She grabs his attention and orders him to stare at Exilia right now. "Stop whining," she looked absolutely adorable. Yuta finally clocks them both. What a gorgeous duo, but the elf catches exactly where his gaze is stuck. Seeing her friend shake with nerves, Misaki can't help but wonder if he's freezing. Alright then, Exilia is stepping in to help. She digs through her bag like her life depends on it, then yanks out a vial. Lilgard's magical recipe was the real deal. It crushed every cold like it was nothing, no matter what kind. Then she pops the vial open and stirs a splash of it into the water. It was a medicine so powerful it hit like a lightning strike. It powers through your bloodstream, clears it out, and cranks up your immune defenses. He takes a few sips and it has me hooked, because that rustic taste feels like it came from somewhere ancient. Medication or not, if their treatment looked like this, they'd better clean up their basic sanitation fast. Masaki snaps to it, "There's a strange scent on you," and he can't ignore it. Yuta leaned in and fired off the question, had he taken a shower? People started saying he only showered the day before, then just collapsed, and right then her eyes lit up like fireworks. She storms into Exilia to tell her something. Right in the middle of it all, she throws. Misaki throws fuel on the flames, snapping that it's the wife's duty to bathe her husband. then clamps a grip on Utah before he can so much as slip away. The boy fights off embarrassment, but it swallows him whole. And when Exilia realizes she can't do this alone, she snaps and calls out to Ververine for help. The knight shows up out of nowhere, like magic just snapped into place. For some reason, she showed up dressed like a nurse too. Even though her face was on fire with embarrassment, she still had to wear it. She grips the patient's other arm while Exilia barrels up with a cloth, then coaxes, "Be a good boy, okay?" If he didn't stop moving, he'd finish the job fast, and since she was his wife, it was her job to take care of him. That day, screams of pure despair tore through the distance like a warning you couldn't ignore. At night, Yuta slips up to Momoka and taps her shoulder, then asks in a hurry if she's got any update on the problem. But the older girl was already on her second drink, and she stared at him like she had no idea what just happened. Yuta then admits he's out of options. He really doesn't know how else to help Lilgard. Their first move was to drill them on how to wash their hands the right way. He didn't just train her, he taught Exilia himself, step by step. But that moment hit way closer and more personally than he ever expected. It felt like he'd cracked open a whole new level of progress. But yeah, getting them to wash their hands was a nightmare, because they had zero water to work with. Because once the water ran dry, they had to sprint back to the well and haul up fresh more. But just as he's talking, Utah snaps, an idea hits him, and Momoka can actually see the gears in his head start grinding. The truth, she didn't want to touch that topic right now, so why in the world wasn't he joining her for a drink? But Exilia can't stand how close she's getting. She tells Momoka to back off and give him some space. He scoots back just a bit, then waves it off like it's nothing, no big deal. Back when they were kids, they used to shower together, so finding that out hits Exilia like a gut punch and sends her into even more rage. She didn't want to hear a single word about any of that. She snatches Utah by the arm and declares they're out of here, and Momoka lets out a shocked gasp. She pulls a nasty face and asks if the elf's just jealous. Then the moment she cracks Exilia's guard, Mamika lunges in and clamps down on her. He knew exactly what she was doing. He ripped the elf's top off, yanking it up with brutal force. Meanwhile, Yuta keeps sipping like nothing's happening, already used to Momoka's drunken antics. He tells her to quit teasing Exilia, and she bursts into laughter. So she dives right back into drinking, and when YouTube asks if it was healthy, she grimaces like it's a personal insult. They brewed drinks by fermenting plants and grains until the magic kicked in. There was no chance this wasn't going to be healthy. Utah can't believe what that show just did to him. But then he spots something on the table, and suddenly his brain clicks, stitching all the clues together. Then he leans in and says he can use some spray alcohol. Back then, they poured alcohol onto wounds like it was magic, because it naturally disinfected and kept infections at bay, so yeah, you get the idea. They figured out that even without water, they could still sanitize their hands by using alcohol. He thinks of Momoka, and the second he does, she freezes, totally confused by the abrupt switch. Meanwhile, Exilia was getting slammed by the older girl. Because she kept stripping and wouldn't stop, she ran out of options, so she begged Yuta to step in and help. Alcohol's in hand, he kicks things off by teaching the entire population how to use them. Though for now, they could finally seize control of the situation. With Exilia by his side, he finally figured it out. Lilgard's farmland doesn't grow by chance, it cycles crops in a repeating planting loop. Method, they split the land into 3 sections and rotate the crops between them. The real nightmare starts right here, turning this into an adaptation. The world's climate was nothing like theirs, and that difference could spell disaster for them fast. Crops, yeah, that's exactly what he's pointing at. Exilia nods and agrees. Her land was already hanging by a thread, and that scorching coastal heat didn't give it a break. He blurts out, was there any temperature magic? And she claims they can make ice, but it'll melt the second the heat hits, so Utah's left stuck, staring at the problem, wondering what to do next. Turns out, modern agriculture can grow tropical fruits in freezing places, never the other way around. Yeah, maybe they should have thrown up some kind of tent out of nowhere. Utah grabs a plan and whips around toward Exilia. He told her to round up every single person she could. They start building this massive greenhouse, and just as they near the spot, Mew blurts out, "Wait, what are you guys doing?" Isaki can't contain her excitement. She starts explaining, and the vinyl they have in the village crew pitched a tent and slammed it into place to block out the sun. Now it was Exilia's time. She unleashed her magic and dropped the temperature fast. Then the princess drops to her knees and starts praying with everything she's got. And just like that, Utah is about to watch the temperature plummet on the thermometer. But the wild temperature swings also knock their pressure rate back down. Exilia springs to her feet, grinning because it actually worked, and Utah's jaw drops as magic hits him like a wave. He snaps back to that other time. And right then, when Exilia touched him, something felt wildly different. Queen flat out said that a contract had finally been sealed. She grabs his hands, thanking him with tears for saving her daughter. That kind of spirit in a human wasn't something you saw every day, it's seriously rare. Exilia throws out that he could use magic too, and the young man is left staring in total confusion. But then she spots something off, something wrong asterisk, and marches right up to him. He asked if he always did things like that, right from the start, imagining exactly how it would all end. Because the real magic in him wasn't just power, it was pure production, like he could make miracles happen on command. At least that's exactly what she felt blasting out of his magic. If he could lock onto the goal with a crystal-clear mind, the magic would surge through him like it finally found its target. Utah then quizzes, so magic takes time, and the answer hits fast, depends on the kind. Wind magic is a nightmare, but earth magic is ridiculously simple. Then she starts fiddling with something, flashes a smile and promises, "I'll give you an example." Exilia clasped her hands together and started praying to the spirit of the earth. She keeps hammering the stick, then as soon as she's done, she grins and says the wood is now harder than iron. She pushes Yuta to give it a shot. And in one awful accident, he ruined his bag. In that exact moment, he can't help but imagine Masaki having the time of her life with it, while Exilia watches him, grinning with pure joy. So he needed practice to pull it off, but Utah felt like the kind of guy who picked it up instantly. Back in the present, he watched her cast with magic, and his mind screamed, "Wait, could I do that too?" Misaki bursts in out of nowhere, fully panicked. The girl blurted out that damn it, she's got bad news, and he snapped, "Why the rush?" And his friend blurts that a typhoon is barreling toward the coast. Typhoon is barreling toward Ayaga right now. After catching the news on TV, Exilia leaned in and fired off a question to Misaki. Is this typhoon really that bad? Pausing for a breath, the girl admits, with dread in her voice, that if they don't act right now, the crops will be destroyed. Utah kills the TV. Meanwhile, Lilgard had no tall buildings and was so flimsy it would snap under strong winds. If it ever got there, they'd have. Right in the middle of the chaos, Mew suddenly barges in and breaks the silence. And he blurts out, "Is there any way we can harvest before the typhoon hits?" But that was basically impossible, because from planting to harvesting, every single step was done by hand. But since getting into Lilgard was locked down hard, they couldn't even sneak in their machinery. Then Yuta suddenly hits on an idea. They tear back to Lilgard and race straight for the greenhouse. Exilia snaps into action and starts casting her magic spell. Magic crackles and the ground starts to shudder, turning one idea into action. Build a wall around the fields, a solid barrier that blocks the wind dead in its tracks. Misaki's jaw drops. Utah and everything about it just has her completely stunned. He prayed that the barrier could take that brutal wind without cracking. The wind kept roaring louder and louder, and Utah was still zoned out in the middle of a nap. When Exilia burst into his room and shook him awake, the wind's spirits had already been whispering to her. The crop field was seconds away from getting wiped out. The wind outside howled like it had gone insane, and that wrecked everything for them. Yuta leans in and asks Exilia, "Can you raise one more wall for me?" That was the absolute limit she could push. You couldn't build a wall taller than that, Utah. He wonders if there's anything he can do, and then, right on cue, Exilia suddenly feels a sharp shift in her mind. Magic. Then the spirits started whispering, warning that the whole field was about to be obliterated. Berverine suddenly bursts onto the scene and tells them, straight up, that it's way too early to throw in the towel. She jumped in too, ready to help the moment they said they needed anything. She could whip out her iron magic, and just then, you suddenly remembered something. He leans in and begs Exilia to fire off that old magic again, the one that boosts power and makes everything hit harder. If she could pour magic into the roots, those plants wouldn't even budge when the wind came. She summons the spirit of the earth and pleads, like the ground itself has to answer. Her power hit them like a punch, and from way off the others could only stare as she tore through everything. Exilia was pouring her heart and soul into protecting the field. Till the wind finally dies down. And just like that, the chaos dies down and the world finally falls silent. Utah is heading into his shower right now, and thank the stars, the typhoon already swung off course earlier than anyone expected. Thank the gods, everything finally turned out right. Suddenly, Exilia barges into the bathroom, crashing into the room and jolting the poor guy half to death. Berverine insisted that Japanese people had a long-standing tradition of bathing together. So she dug deep for courage and marched right to where he was. The water's warm and cozy, so she scoots closer and snuggles right up. And she's glowing with excitement because they're doing it together. I couldn't stop thinking about the past few days. I couldn't stop gushing about how unreal Utah was. He'd saved her again and again in so many different ways. And when he was with his family, it was pure, non-stop joy, but once she ruled solo, she couldn't do a single thing to help her people. His gut twisted over that comment, yet he wouldn't shut up, bragging that she felt safe and protected with him. As the daughter of the former lord, she had no choice, she had to do it. He lunged to interrupt, but the words caught in his throat. He had to shove that weight off her chest, right then and there. Next, she had the sinking feeling that she didn't deserve to be his wife. They shot their words out, and all they got back was cold, crushing silence. She marched right up to him and wrapped him in a tight hug. Even when she knew she didn't have what it took, she still loved him with her whole heart and desperately wanted to stay by his side. So she pressed him to tell her what he really thought of her. The two started stammering, completely blanking on what to say. But just like that, the elf dropped into the bathtub, and a loud jolt of surprise shot through the room. Vervorin wasted 0 seconds and burst in with pure, unstoppable fervor. The water felt way too scalding for the princess, so she would pull back and take her. Yuta slipped away too, then somehow he ended up climbing out of the bath as well. But it wouldn't let go. Exilia's image kept looping in his mind. The very next day, they felt the weather flip on them, and that change hit like a warning bell. Misaki asked how Lilgard was holding up, and Exilia shot back that the river levels must have fallen after all that weather. And that's when the dragon god's central lake started to wither, drying up right before everyone's eyes. That title, Dragon God, snatched Yuta's attention like lightning. And Exilia leaned in and told him, straight up, she'd appointed him as the guardian of Lilgard. Misaki's eyes lit up and she practically blurted, "Let's go meet this guardian." And the princess smiled, saying it would be her absolute pleasure to take her straight to him. But she had to swallow her pride and admit she was worried. Yuta stared at her, completely confused, and chose to roll with them because he needed to size up just how dangerous this whole situation really was. As soon as they rolled up, they laid eyes on the dragon's armored scales. The guardian was on the brink of being wiped out. Misaki and Yuta stared in total disbelief because they'd never, ever seen a creature like this before. When she saw it, Exilia's chest tightened like a fist and the rest of the world blurred for a second, because unlike the other two, that moment hit her hard. She shouted to Yuta, "What do you mean who?" Seeing the elf's condition, they snapped into panic, because this was absolutely bad news. Exilia never saw it coming. The lake shriveled dry faster than she could even blink. The dragon could only survive in water. If it kept going like this, they were going to haul him away. Yuta and Misaki froze, totally shocked when they heard the whole thing. There was no denying it. Lilgard's protective barrier was holding strong, and then it cut off mid-action. He started getting thinner, and that wasn't random. It was the water dragon's power draining him, which was. And it kept getting worse. About 2 days after she came to visit, he was still talking with her, but now he couldn't even do that anymore. Exilia clenched her jaw, then made the choice that changed everything, because the people of Lilgard had always stood between her and danger. Through every crushing moment, they never left her side, never stopped backing each other up. And this time, she was done sitting back. She'd make sure she followed through. Shield the people of Lilgard so that everything mattered, because it did. You'd have to tap into Utah's power burrow. And when Yuta saw her ask with that raw, earnest sincerity, he froze, completely stunned, unable to even speak. The second he got his answer, she threw open the door and went for it. "Yeah, there's no way I can keep living like this," he snapped. Then Yuta closed in and softly patted the elf's head. Said the moment finally arrived, he was done waiting. Now he'd cook up a plan to handle that problem and make sure Lil was safe. The guard snapped into action, and the second they told me what was going on, she shot back that a new problem had just exploded. That barrier shut Lilgard down so hard the satellites couldn't even spot a thing. So if that barrier ever weakened, every other country would stumble onto the secret magical land for the first time. They had to figure out how to refill that lake fast for Japan's sake and for everyone's. Even if they cooked up a plan to save the dragon, the island and the government wouldn't lift a finger, and soon they'd be stuck doing all the work themselves. First, they slammed the ice magic into place, but it still wasn't going to save them, because if the rain didn't hit soon, in the blink of an eye there'd be no water left, just stone. Everyone was on edge. No backup meant every step was twice as brutal. Water. One more day crashes in, and with everything else failing, Misaki begs for the island's water storage, his last resort. It was a monstrous machine that could turn salty seawater into fresh, drinkable water. But yeah, because it's government property, they'd need internal clearance first, and even if they managed to load it onto the boat, the trip alone would take around 12 hours, plus that machine can't be moved by civilians. You hesitated for a split second, like your brain needed proof before it moved. Axilia asked, if I use wind magic, can you move that machine? And she said yes, but only because the magic had to stay locked in stable mode. Masaki blurted out, can we really use teleportation magic here? Sure they could, but only back to the exact place she'd already been before. The young girl flung herself to the ground, convinced she'd found unlimited power. Then Yuta's mind snapped into action with an idea. He told her straight up that Misaki was right on the money. But he didn't even clock how messed up their positions really were. And somehow managed to make his friend feel super awkward. He brushes off the whole situation and snaps that they can handle this with transportation magic. If the plan hits, they'll blast forward with wind magic and slip back using transportation magic, so they can pull it off without burning Exilia out. So Momoka promises, I'll make the request. He snatches Cecilia's hand and tells her they've got to scramble and get everything ready. Finally, the elf felt hope creeping back into his bones. The transport plane screeches down and touches the island, tires biting the runway as it lands. Exilia and Yuta were locked in, ready to go. They huddled behind brutal wind and frost magic, using it like a shield to keep danger away. They were bolted to the plane on the outside, hanging there like they had no choice but to ride the ride. Out of nowhere, Xylia lunges into a hug just as fear starts creeping into her chest. She still remembered the exact moment they met for the first time. Rita somehow managed to calm her down, and it totally caught everyone off guard. Back then, the two of them clutched hands tight, and all at once, a storm of questions tore through her mind about how he'd come through for her. And Yuta blurts that he's doing all of this because it felt like he absolutely had to. Exilia pressed him, asking if that was truly the only reason he had left. She could tell he was kind to the core, but deep down, she felt there was something bigger hiding behind that smile. In the end, worry still crawled in her chest, then he wrapped her in safety and she finally felt at ease. That hit him like a shock. She wanted him to pause and think just a little longer about why he staying with her. Since he was alone, Yuta felt totally at ease and he just kept going. He tells you his father got wrecked in an accident and didn't make it. But the truth hit like a brick. This wasn't some run-of-the-mill accident, and Exilia couldn't believe it. Years ago, the island got hammered by relentless rain, and then a raging typhoon crashed in like the sky was falling. That day, Yuta had already snapped at his father and bolted from home early, and the moment he looked out and saw what was going down, regret hit him like a punch. And when his father finally found him, the boy lunged into his arms, hugging him so tight he couldn't even finish the sentence. Tightly clasped in his own breath, he burst into pure joy. His savior had finally arrived. No matter what he wanted, his father's presence always lit the fuse in him, driving everything he did. But right when it looked like things were finally turning around, a brutal landslide slammed down and stole his life in an instant. His father threw himself away so he could live, and just like that, he was left alone. So he dug in his heels and decided he'd prove that this whole exchange was absolutely worth it. Exilia froze in shock as Yuta finally vomited out every ounce of pain he'd been carrying for years. After all those years, Exilia finally stepped in and wrapped her arms around the young man, trying to soothe him. She couldn't deny it, her partner was pure courage through and through. Right then, Yuta just broke, tears burst out of him before he could stop them. As the helicopter tore across the sea, skimming between the islands. Finally, they touched down, and the moment they landed, Yuta's stomach twisted. What if this plan didn't work? She put in the work, and somehow it felt like Momoka nailed everything, just like she promised. They needed a signature from someone in the government, and yeah, he figured it was game over. Then Momoka just made one phone call, and somehow she pulled it off. The guy stepped up and introduced himself to both of them, and Yuta couldn't stop wondering what Momoka had cooked up. But soon he snapped to it. Everything had been moved and loaded the right way. Maybe this was the only shot to save the dragon, until Exilia saw the guardian like that and her strength drained fast. Yuta's face said it all, and she hurriedly told him she was fine. She just chugged more magic than she thought she would. Then she asked if there was anything else they needed, but he cut her off mid-sentence. From here on out, she could finally stop fighting, catch her breath, and hand the rest over to him. Even though it's a crazy complex machine, the setup was weirdly easy. He just had to slide one side into the lake. And the other guy was out there in the seawater until everything snapped for one sudden moment. The cable jammed solid, like fate had decided to screw him over, and it looked like this nightmare wasn't letting up anytime soon. It ended way too soon, and the waves swallowed it before it could ever reach the shore. Just a few meters left and he was trapped, mind racing as he tried to figure out his next move. And then boom, Exilia's voice slammed into his thoughts. Yuta realized just like that he wasn't just powerless, he could use magic too. How did he pull that off? Because in the next breath, he remembered the trick of forming an image. So he had to just picture it in his mind. And just like that, tada, hose connected to the next part. Just look at him, pure shock hit him as he realized what he'd done. Suddenly, Exilia snapped his name out of nowhere. With a bright grin, she told him the water was finally climbing all the way to the lake. Then she spotted it and her jaw dropped at what sat right in front of her, because that was the only thing he could see clearly. Right by the cable stood Exilia's statue, bold, shameless, and way too revealing for public eyes. Misaki and Momoka burst in, ready to celebrate. They broke into relief. Turns out everything held together. The barrier started healing and somehow they dodged the worst outcome. Mew fired off a proud congratulations, and as she walked away, Utah was left standing there, suddenly feeling awkward. He demanded where Ververine was, and the girl popped up out of the water like she'd been waiting there all along. She grabbed Exilia's statue and fired off a question. Didn't he feel ashamed to pull something like that? When Momoka and Misaki laid eyes on the artwork, shock hit them like a truck. From far away, Exilia watched them with a warm smile in her eyes. And in the quietest breath, she thanked Yuta with all her heart for helping her. It was downright embarrassing, but still. Those mermaid outfits were actually adorable. Seriously, wait for this. Yuta's grinning ear to ear because she finally gets to see the Waguri house. Masaki was having a blast cosplaying with Exilia, and the outfits they were making turned out seriously amazing. Totally worth it. Oh, and don't forget, they made sure you had to comment too. Exilia strides up and asks, so, was it really okay for me to wear that outfit? Utah grins and says yes, then fires off a quick question. Does she have any commitments in the Lil Guard? But she shuts it down. She's on break, and that's exactly why mermaids have her curiosity all fired up. She'd heard the rumors mystical beings lured ships to ruin, and their singing dragged the whole thing under. It'd be a disaster if even one of them showed up in Lilgard. Right then, Mew barges into the room and blurts, Utah, got a minute? Her sudden arrival leaves him completely stunned. Mew rushes in to apologize for cutting you off. But if she could reach them some other way, without needing to talk. While everyone else could talk to him, Mew felt locked out, like no words would ever reach him, and it hit hard, even though they shared the same roof. Utah blurts out an apology for not catching that sooner, then pushes for them to get closer because she's got a request she needs to make. Mew had caught the odd habit right away. Utah called everyone by their first name, like it was second nature. So she demanded he call her by her first name too. Yeah, he's kind of awkward about it, but Mew refuses to back off, pushing herself to get closer to him. So he gives in right on the spot, but switching gears that fast is surprisingly hard. The second he finally manages to speak, the girl's face lights up like pure joy. Out of nowhere, Momoka blurts out that something's gone terribly wrong and presses the phone to his ear. Turns out the fishermen of Lilgard are raking in trouble, breaking fishing laws left and right, so Utah is shocked to find out. On this island, there's a spot marked off for fishing, and it feels like the island itself is casting lines right there too. This kept crashing their catch, slashing the amount the island's fishermen could pull in. Utah starts freaking out on the phone, but Momoka steps in and steadies him. These were people from another world, so nobody was going to get arrested, but they still had to play by the island's rules, so the smart move was to settle it fast. Momoka flashes a smile because she already knows this mess was never hers to begin with. And after a tense minute of silence, YouTube started freaking out. The three burst into an argument, debating each other like the world depends on it. The island fishermen's boats and the Lilgard residents' ships, they're nothing alike. But because they kept fishing in the same patch, their catch kept getting smaller. And when they jack up the fish count, Exilia can't help but question it. Alright, they couldn't deny it, so she decided to go all in and double the fish amount. She calls her partner the mayor. Aaron, then boom, he startles Utah, who had no clue anything was coming. Exilia leans in, starts talking to the creature. He asks her to hear Yuta's request, and the two hit it off instantly, like they've known each other forever. Later that day, Marin leapt aboard a fishing boat with the crew. And when one of the fishermen whistles, everything changes. She rockets straight into the ocean. Because she was a creature of the deep, she slipped past the fishing nets and sank even farther. While she spotted the school of fish, the fishermen stayed dead still on the surface, waiting for the signal. After a bit, they couldn't believe the haul, so many fish piled up. Because of Morin, the people of Lilgard could haul in fresh fish all the time. At first, the fishermen freaked out, but once the shock wore off, they quickly adjusted. That fishing technique was absolutely mind-blowing, so if she jumped in from here on out, it could be a win for both sides. When Zelia saw that, she couldn't stop smiling. Saki and Yuta felt this huge wave of relief crash over them. This time, the whole mess got handled fast. They couldn't risk miscommunication, so they fired up translation magic. Now both countries' fishermen could talk and understand each other without stumbling. Misaki suddenly hit on something. Magic was real, so if they studied the language, they could finally understand it. If they start a school, it'll make life way easier for both sides. Zelia was burning with curiosity. She had no clue what a school even was. A little later, Misaki grabbed the photo album and showed Yuta and her younger school pictures. The princess practically fizzed with excitement at the thought of finally getting her own school. But Yuta snapped and said it wasn't all that amazing. And for Exilia, it was nothing short of mind-blowing. Since only nobles got an education, she'd been starving for knowledge her whole life, and then she finally got it. It honestly felt like a utopia straight out of a dream. Everyone trains side by side, no one gets left behind, and they all know they can tackle any task. Seeing that, Exilia blurted out that she wished there was a school back in her country. Maybe her people's true genius is being kept in the shadows, but she refuses to let it stay there, and she's determined to open doors for everyone. If they actually built a school, that might be the thing that finally helps them adapt. So he rolled with the idea the two of them pushed, and Exilia couldn't smile harder after hearing the news. The second they pitched that idea to me, she shut it down instantly, leaving both of them hollow and desperate, just not for the kind of reason they ever wanted. First came the wall of professionals. There was no way to ship teachers in there. And if they did, they'd start reshaping the local culture, turning it into a full-on invasion. Masaki bursts in and cuts the sermon right in the middle. He says Yuta wouldn't run into these problems if it started a one-sided. Mew just stood there baffled like, wait, what did he mean? And of course, it wasn't exactly profound since he was also the king's head. Instead of teaching only one side, they can trade what they know, study side by side. Mu sinks into thought, ponders the. It's just an idea, but if you treat it like a system of swaps and exchanges, it might actually work. Misaki beams with joy, grabs his hand, and celebrates like she's about to explode with happiness. With the sudden closeness, Mew freezes up and feels totally awkward. You know what I love? Friends always stuck together, and Misaki counted Mew as one of hers, no doubt about it. Right then, panic slams into her. She has no clue what the hell she's supposed to do. How do you deal with physical contact like that? Because the moment it hits, her system just crashes. Just as fast, she snaps back. And he says, because we're friends, you can. She'd push heaven and earth to help them start school together, because as their friend, she'd never stop trying. And it all finally ends. Misaki can't stop smiling, happier than ever. To kick things off, they picked one of the castle's rooms and started there. With her magic blazing, Exilia summoned brand new desks right out of thin air for every student. But magic couldn't touch the painting and blackboard part, so they rolled up their sleeves and did the whole thing by hand. With everything finally set and ready to go, they could start snatching kids and recruiting them, but they were missing the one thing that mattered most, a teacher. And right then, Misaki already had it covered. Exilia and Mew were stepping in as their teachers. Yuta asks, do we really have to cosplay? And his friend grins, saying it's exactly what puts you in the mood. It was supposed to be a piece of cake, like trying to tutor a room full of kids in elementary school. Who says she gets it, but the truth is, she understood something totally different. And rushed to the board to lay out the core fundamentals of particle physics. Since nothing worked out with her, Exilia had no choice. She had to take her shot with Exilia's next move. She lights up at the thought, and the two of them start believing this plan is finally going to work. Step by step, she starts breaking it down, one simple word at a time. And right then, she started pressing him with questions, one after another. Yuta was buzzing with excitement, finally getting what was happening from the very start. They'd only ask yes or no questions, so the whole thing stayed refreshingly simple. At the moment she asks about a promise of eternal love, Yuta's face turns a blazing shade of red. She just couldn't wrap her head around it. Asking that wasn't wrong, and yet it still got her treated like a villain. But this was a classroom. Nobody asks questions like that in the middle of class. Yuta got absolutely smashed. Exilia let her feelings rip right out of her control. Bervorine and Masaki didn't just teach, they fired people up and showed others exactly how to do it. And Mew plunged deeper and deeper into the subject like she couldn't stop. Masaki tries to lift her spirits because the moment she falls short, sadness hits her hard. But the girl had to finally face it. The class was brutally hard to keep up with. Seeing the situation spiral, Yuta snaps into action and rushes in to stop it, then goes straight to Mew to talk. She didn't have to shoulder it all by herself, she could just leave. Send those guys off with the classes, let them sort it out. Every single one of them was a friend, and that word hit like lightning in my chest. Magic sparked to Mew, and in the next breath her mood flipped, she perked right up. And promised she'd trust them to teach the classes. The three of them froze, she'd fully bounced back, and seeing that wild turnaround felt almost unreal. Alright, Utah is about to take the teacher's role. A few years earlier, he'd been tutoring for a while, so Misaki was sure her friend would pull it off. Exiled was absolutely buzzing with excitement. Finally, Lilgard was going to get his own school. Right when they're deep in the conversation, Mamaka shows up out of nowhere with a bag full of juices for them. Everything was finally clicking into place, like the world didn't even need her. Yuda, thanks for the juices. Momoka looked genuinely worried. They looked like they were finally doing great until pure carelessness caught up with them. It was just one tiny room, stacked with a few hard-earned supplies. They didn't even dare call it a school yet. Everybody stared at her, all jittery, and kept asking why she was saying that. And that's just how it worked for her, easy like breathing. They were building a place people could finally trust with their kids. So yeah, he's the lord of that place, plain and simple. He'd have to win over every single person in that city, no exceptions. They didn't even have a clue who lived there or what those documents said, so from this point on, every person they ran into was basically a mystery. He'd have to earn his trust before he'd even think about believing this new system. Here's the thing, she still can't stop making her. She still had urgent business to handle on the island, and it left the whole group reeling in pure shock. And it was starting to get under his skin. And even as everything kept pushing ahead, Momoka still had to scramble for time to finally adapt. Because right then, they still had no clue what she was trying to tell them. Later at the castle of Lilgard, he demands why some students are missing, and the kids blurt out that the rest can't make it because they've got family obligations this time. It looked like every single one of them had a reason burning in their chest. It turned into a real problem. Only 3 students showed up, and Exilia's worry hit the roof. Just days before, they'd stood up and lit a fire under everyone, giving a lecture on why education matters. And yeah, just like you'd expect, the response hit like a brick, pure negativity. They were burning themselves out just to make it through the day alive. Misaki urges them to sneak into the castle, while Exilia pulls Yuta aside to talk. If they hit the doorsteps one by one, maybe they could finally talk the parents around. But they stormed straight into the village. He kept calling, but not a single voice ever answered. Until some guy storms out and complains about the noise, he realizes it wasn't supposed to happen at all, it was an unexpected one. He meets the visitor, flashes a quick smile, then steps up and introduces himself. I'm Bereg. He was half-dwarf, burning with one question, how could he actually help? Yuta then blurted out that a kid had skipped class. Borog insists his son will be totally fine, no need for all that studies nonsense. Exilia tries to step in, insisting it's the only way, but he shuts her down, claiming he's a dwarf craftsman and already knows everything he needs. He already knew, so he snapped back to work, leaving those 2 standing outside, totally stunned. Exilia knew this wasn't going to be easy. Lilgard citizens dug in like stubborn rocks. I just wish Misaki was here, but she was slammed with something and couldn't make it. As the 2 kept bickering, a kid suddenly shouted, calling them both out. Ruaru, one of the kids who skipped class, was the one who was missing. They demand to know what the 2 were doing there, especially you, Professor. After a quick chat, Raru grins and hurries them along to meet his siblings. The girl lay sprawled in bed, staring up at the ceiling like something was about to snap. And the moment they roll in, she jolts awake. Utah's just standing there, totally baffled. The moment the girl sits up, both of them go wide-eyed. Her light blue hair shines like a rare, precious gemstone. Suddenly, a sweet feminine voice snaps from right behind them. And she blurts out that the girl is her daughter, Fiora, and even insists on thanking the both of them for stepping in to help. Day after day, she tells her daughter, go on, introduce yourself, and her daughter steps up and does it. Ruru blurts out that his sister is sick. She'd always fallen sick if she didn't have water, so their mother had to rush out to get more. So he had to get answers. Why had those 2 come to see his sister? I mean, she was totally head over heels for Prince Yuta. As she sprints to catch her brother, sickness hits hard, leaving Nasilia and Utah panicking with worry. The second the girl hits the ground, her brother barks for everyone to grab water, right now. A little later, he blurts out that his sister wants to join the classes too. But with her condition acting up, it was safest she stayed home. So yeah, he couldn't make it to class that day because he couldn't bring himself to leave her alone. Exiled is shocked in the best way when she realizes Utah wants to help, because he's pushing so his students can finally get to school. Cool, so we had to scramble and figure out how to make things better so this could actually happen. He braces himself, calls on the spirit of the earth, and sets out to carve a path through the mountain so the water finally has somewhere to run. But all he can manage to split is a tiny stone. Exiled asks if he's okay, and he admits that magic hit way harder than he expected, yet he still digs in and keeps trying. Which leaves the elf panicking because she refuses to see him push himself too far. Still, he doesn't stop. He's convinced he can pull it off. Until Ruru suddenly orders him to stop, shocking the two who are watching. He says that if they suddenly fuse his power with Exilia's, they'll pull it off and win. But the boy calls for him to stop, and the second he even tried, that alone lights up his heart and makes him genuinely happy. Utah's heart shatters the moment he hears it, but before he can even get a word out, the boy bolts, leaving the two of them in the dust. The blazing sun hung high above, burning bright like it owned the whole sky. With the heat blasting, Misaki hurried to fill up a pool. He asked what she was doing, and she shrugged like it was obvious. I just wanted to cool off. Soon, she flat out brushes him off and drags me in, calling me to join. She shows up in a brand new, super adorable swimsuit. And with a grin, she says there's nothing better than a pool to beat the summer heat, and she even invites Utah, right as the boy starts turning beet red. Seeing all that water, Exiled couldn't stop thinking about Ruaru. Misaki walks right up to her and asks if the elf wants to wear a bikini too. But she shuts it down, saying she's not used to clothes like that. Misaki accidentally catches her foot on the rubber and goes down hard, landing flat on her butt. Yuta blurts out, "Are you okay?" and the girl answers, "I'm fine." He spots a rubber thing by the pool, and the moment his eyes catch it, a wild idea hits him. So they round up the villagers and everyone's smiling. Zelia beams and thanks them all for coming. But they can't even hide it, they're completely baffled, desperate to understand what on earth they're doing. They're right up until Ruru suddenly shows up beside Mew, clutching something in their hands. Now the villagers are all eyes and whispers, because he hauled a hose straight from Ayaga. Over the next few days, they dug and dug until they managed to move the water. Utah shoves the hose into the river and shoots a signal to Exiled. Then she whips out her magic and reroutes the rushing water before it can do more damage. Misaki snaps, asking if he'd been using magic instead of pumping, but he shakes his head and grins, saying it was only to give it a quick kickstart. Then the water would surge along on its own, like it finally found its way. Cecilia takes a deep breath, then declares, "I'm done, my spell is complete." Yeah, they drop everything and sprint to the other side, and Misaki's jaw drops. Turns out the water really is asterisk moving, flowing right before his eyes. And she suddenly realizes this whole magic thing might just be physics, and it slams into her way too fast. When you hook one end of a pipe to a stream of water and it starts to fill up, the water keeps pouring right on cue, just like pool day, and that's when Yuta's idea hit. Misaki's jaw drops when she realizes her friend was this insanely clever. And the moment the villagers hear he learned it in school, they erupt into a debate over how this tiny bit of knowledge could change their lives. It blew my mind that Raru could learn something that intense too. While everyone's distracted, Exiled seizes the moment, yells that's exactly what schools are for, and grabs the room in one shot. Master the hard way, solving problems without magic, just like Ruru had done. Even other kids could pull themselves up, learn everything they need, and build a life so prosperous it feels unreal. He's stunned by her words, and the second she finishes, the worry lifts off his shoulders like it never existed, so he can finally head back to school. Ryubru is overwhelmed with emotion, then she tears up and thanks her. But there was one wild detail: somehow, they'd used magic to get the water to flow. The very next day, the classroom was packed to the brim. Looks like that demonstration finally won over the villagers, and that's exactly what leaves Momoko stunned. She had to talk to the villagers face to face, but she couldn't, so dread just kept creeping in. But when she saw it work, joy lit up her face, and Yuta deserved every bit of praise. Her compliment hit him so hard, he instantly got shy. Misaki strides in and blares, "Class is starting." Then she snaps the order for everyone to stand and bow. And seriously, thank you all for showing up with me. Classes keep piling in all week long, one after another. The student shoots her hand up, desperate to get in the action. It's Fira, she's finally back in class, and Yuta can't believe how fast she learned. Right at the end of class, when everyone started filing out the door, Yuta blurts out her name in a hurry, and the second she hears him, her face lights up. Then he tells her he's genuinely thrilled to see her back in class. She and Ruru can only breathe out in gratitude, because it all worked out only thanks to Utah. Now her sister could actually see Utah every single day, and the girl instantly shrank into shyness. Then he went and asked the teacher for his take on. Just as it starts to feel calm, another kid slips in. He steps up and says, "I'm Zakasu," and then drops the bombshell. He's Bor's son. Rock Yuta's grinning so hard you can't miss it. Then it clicks that Rock wanted the exact same thing. After studying, Fiora and Ryoru's dad finally convinced him, and just like that, his father let him step into class. The kids burst out with heartfelt gratitude, and you can feel the relief in every word. But something was gnawing at Utah's mind. After all, he'd already taught everyone that he didn't want to be called Prince. He wanted Sensei, plain and simple. The kids are totally baffled by that word. Then he leans in and tells you, in Japan, teachers don't get just any name, students call them Sensei. He fires it off a few more times, again and again. The second the kids finally get it, they blurt it out over and over again like they can't stop. At first, the villagers didn't trust the school's teachings, but everything flipped once they tackled one of their biggest problems. Before long, they started handing their kids the new knowledge without hesitation. They grabbed materials kids in Japan loved, then made sure everyone stayed fueled by rolling out snacks. One day, Vera steps in and he immediately spots her, then drops a real compliment on her fresh new hairstyle. The girl says she overheard the sensei say he had a soft spot for ponytails, so she figured, let's test it, and tried one to see if it actually looked good. Exilia showers her with compliments, gushing that she's stunning, and then Fiora leans in and blurts, "So, was Yuta really your husband?" With a bright smile, she admits, "Yeah, of course, we were married." But that crushes her heart because now she'd only get one role in his life, his mistress. That one comment hits the room like a bomb, and everyone just stands there stunned. An 8-year-old girl has no business knowing things like that. Exilia tries to tell her that mistress wasn't the right term, but Fiora won't back down. She keeps pushing, demanding to know if Yuta somehow can't stand women. Right then, Exilia got wiped out, and he didn't even blink, like her defeat barely hit him. He never once imagined he'd find himself falling for people of the same gender. With that, she bolts, still trapped inside her own fanfics, ripping Masaki and Utah's minds wide open, leaving them totally stunned. She teased him, but Yuta snapped back that it wasn't funny. Then his friend shrugged and said she was just messing around, fully aware he had his eye on girls. It slams into him out of nowhere, especially when she clocked the shift in the way they looked at each other the moment they walked into high school. Honestly, it had been forever since they shared a bath. Then suddenly he's a lord, and Yuta admits those changes didn't exactly make things easy for him. Masaki nods and tells him she gets it. She can see him trying his hardest. They stuck together like glue, and honestly there was something burning in her chest, something she'd been dying to say for ages. Yep, she always had. But just as she started to finish her sentence, Vera burst in out of nowhere. They stare at her and fire off, "So what are you doing here?" She was dying to grab him earlier, so why did she just hesitate? It wouldn't work because tomorrow was her birthday, and that thrilled them both, even though they had no clue about what came next. Vera snatches his hand and blurts, "So I tell him to head over to her place and finally sit down with her parents." Misaki's eyes light up and he blurts that they should go. Anyway, they were already headed out and it couldn't hurt. Utah can't shake this uneasy feeling, like she's not sure what move to make next. But in the end, he finally takes the birthday invitation. Fiora beams, thanks him, and sprints back home like a weight just lifted off her shoulders. The moment she steps out, use it. He whips around to Misaki and blurts out, "What were you trying to tell me earlier?" She ends up picking coy and tells them, "We should head home too, because the night's getting way too late." And then boom, Ververine's voice bursts out of nowhere. She grabs your attention right there in front of them, then everyone scrambles to spot her, but she's nowhere to be seen. They look up and there she is, tangled and trapped inside a massive kite. Ververine kept shocking him, then she blurted about cutting the string and panic exploded across her face. A few minutes later, she storms back down the stairs and turns. She whips her head toward him and fires off, "I've got something to tell you. It'd be way better if he never showed up at that girl's house." You two leaned in and asked her straight up if Exilia was making her worry. But the knight was genuinely worried about him. She'd warned him before, and she was going to say it again, because this world still had secrets he didn't know, and her advice was the safest path. That comment plunges Yuta into deep thought, because if she'd just said the problem outright, this would have been so much easier. The very next day, he shows up at Fiora's house, with Berverine's words still slamming into his mind. He raps hard on the door. Ryua and her father yanked the door open with big smiles, warmly inviting him inside. Ira was dressed like a princess, glowing with joy as she finally laid eyes on him. He can't help but find it adorable, and the girl's father practically beams when he hears that. Fiera insists it was her mother who crafted that obi for her. Yuta blurted that it's truly beautiful and that it fits her perfectly. Then he added, watching the little girl. He was happier than ever because the table was already set so everyone crowds in, sits down, and fires off a chorus of happy birthday for her. Ruoru beckons her to show her the present, but the second that frog shows up, fear hits her like a punch and she freezes. Bolts to hide behind YouTube. Her mother demands he bring it back to the river, and Yuta insists he's got a gift too, then he takes it and goes. He pulls out the necklace from his pocket, and Fiera's face lights up with pure, unshakable joy. She slips on the necklace, and the moment it gleams, her smile shatters, tears pour out from pure, overwhelming joy. Her father slams the table, laughs with him, and teases him to slow down, because her daughter is supposed to be the prince's lover. Yuta stared at her with pure despair, and Fiera quickly promised that she'd fight harder and make it count from here on out. The night drops. His father had already been crushed by the bottle. Her mom grabs Yuta's attention, thanks him for coming, and then leans in to ask if Fiera had a good time. But the girl's sadness was so obvious that it yanked the woman's attention the second she saw her. Then she blurts out that the girl has to take a bath, like right now. And when he sees Fiera's face drop, he immediately demands to know what's wrong. Fiera then blurts out that she didn't want him to leave, and her mother's heart gets stirred. Ruoru tries to calm things down and tells everyone the sensei will wait. She stared at him, demanding an answer, and Yuta finally caved. "I'll go, just let me know," and he promised he'd wait. He can't stop wondering if he'll ever make it back home. She finally strips off her worries and prepares to jump into a long overdue bath. As everyone feared, Fiera got wrecked by it. With the new waterway opening the way, life got way easier, and thanks to the young master, her daughter finally got to go to school. She asks if the girl's all right, and her mother nods. She's fine. Thanks to Yutz, everything had turned a whole lot better. And yeah, it was time to finally tuck the old man in too. Her father came striding past right in front of her. While she soaks in the bath, her mind slips into deep thought and she loses track of everything around her. Until something in her finally shifts. And when she lets out that scream, Yuta snaps into full alert mode. He doesn't even hesitate, he storms into the bathroom. And then, right at the worst possible moment, he's blindsided by something he never saw coming. Fiera suddenly morphed into a mermaid and he nearly lost his mind, because he'd never seen anything like that before. Back home at last, he spills every last detail to Ververine, word for word. And it was clear as day she wasn't happy at all. She'd already heard the wild rumors that they were descendants of mermaids. And suddenly it all clicked because her father's desperation was screaming the truth. He begged with every ounce of strength, terrified that if he slipped up, anyone would find out. He'd even lied to his best friend just to protect his wife and daughter, because he couldn't let them get discriminated against again. In the last village, the moment they figured out they were mermaids, everything changed fast. They both got thrown out of there because nobody wanted to drag themselves into another move ever again. Fear finally started to evolve. He just couldn't wrap his head around why they were acting like that. So he went straight to Ververine, desperate to find out if it was the same in Lilgard. She grabbed her coffee, took a sip, and then broke it all down. Lilgard was built from fishermen, real salt-of-the-earth survivors who lived and breathed the sea. And everyone knew mermaids didn't just sing, they shattered courage and sank ships with their voices. Most people didn't just fear them, they lived with terror in their bones. That's why they had to disappear fast and hide before anyone caught on. Yuta snapped to attention, stunned. He never looked at it that way, but her family handled refugee immigration, so of course she'd know. He shoots her a question, does Exilia know? And she shakes her head, saying even her own family kept it a secret. Only the women were in the loop, and that detail instantly grabs him. It all came down to one simple truth: nobody had a clue when the change would hit. Inmates always strapped on those dresses and dodged underwear like it was contraband, basically. So yeah, if those guys ever found out about this, it could have been a total disaster for them. It'd unleash a whole storm of problems. His powers were brutally strong and they demanded constant watch. So yeah, standing near that girl spelled disaster, but he couldn't just walk away from a student like that, not when she was part of his. He wanted her and her brother to keep going to school. So even if it turned the place upside down, he'd stay standing. Ververine pressed him and he answered, yes. Yeah, if something happened, he'd find a way through it. Since school was meant for everyone, he couldn't just cut her out like that. So no matter what chaos broke out, he'd always find a way through. Ververine stared him down, then flashed a grin. It was such a relief to see that determination burning in him, ready to drive him forward. Her laugh hit Yuta like a truck. He froze in pure shock. He braced for her to fight him on it, but she shut him down fast. No. Seriously, if he ever chose to walk away and ditch Rory's daughter, that was the moment everything would fall apart. She swore to handle it herself. She would make sure that Princess divorced him. At the end of it all, she was just running a test. She let out a breath of relief, thrilled to see he wasn't the kind of person to hurt others. This time, he'd passed the test. Now he couldn't stop thinking, like his mind was stuck on full blast. He never imagined that pushing to keep Fiera in school could unleash a problem he couldn't see coming. But his father had once warned him if he wanted to protect the people he loved, he had to bite down and stay strong. Yuta was soaking in the sauna's heat when Axilia suddenly burst in and asked, straight-faced, if she could scrub his back. Yuta finally let it happen, but the moment she did, her gut twisted, because he didn't look even a little happy, so He asked, did something happen, and he shot back no. Thank the gods, over the last few weeks, classes have actually been going smooth. More and more kids kept pouring in, one after another. But even after all that, they still couldn't sort the kids by age, and the castle was packed with dangerous weapons just waiting to cause disaster. And slowly, step by step, the citizens started teaming up, and it filled the whole city with happiness. And honestly, their work was getting better because of the prince, so Yuta could finally smile, knowing it all paid off. First, he decided to grab the materials and sketch out a blueprint for the building. Someone suggested Burrow should do it that way. But the moment they stared at him, Borog snapped that he wouldn't do it, leaving everyone in that room stunned. Lately, he couldn't stop worrying about his son's future, because the more time passed, the less he showed up at the store. And he refused to let the girls stay in school, because to him, it just wasn't right. This Japanese culture they talked about felt downright bizarre. He couldn't stomach that kind of education anymore, so he refused to help build an even bigger school. With their rules and traditions, they ran everything their way, and this school was getting crushed because of it. Yuta nearly froze when he heard it, then Zaku cut in mid-argument, grinning and saying he loved the school, loved learning, and wanted to keep going. Japan wasn't under threat until the pressure hit, and he was the one who felt it. The moment they stepped out, they started fighting words, loud, right in front of everyone. With every ounce of strength in his body, the boy fought tooth and nail to protect his school, even as his father stood in his way. You step in and try to cool both of them off, but both of them insisted it was a family mess, and that Yuta had no business stepping into it. Axilia finally got it. She saw why he was panicking, and a hard, stern look snapped onto her face. She tried to lift his spirits, but Yuta snapped that he needed to be alone, so He stormed out, and after a while he headed straight for the thermal zone. And just as he started to focus, more people swept in right after, snatching his attention instantly. They begged for his go-ahead and then joined up with him, and when they were done playing nice, they teased him, so what's the other island like? After all, the moment they met the residents, the kindness hit them hard, only to realize they were struggling financially too, and all they could do was pray things would finally get better. There was always a good side and a bad side, and it all depended on who was looking, and honestly, trying to handle a whole different continent felt brutal. But everything stayed oddly calm. Yuta hauled himself home and collapsed on the porch. Right after that, Misaki swooped in with a drink for him. You could practically see the gears grinding out on him from a mile away, so she rushed in to talk. Misaki was locked in on the mystery, but her parents just didn't get the kids, and Ayaga's residents had never even heard of Lilgard. She kept asking herself how she could make everyone finally talk to each other. If Yuta never reached out, they'd be stuck in the dark, because in the end, they were all still human, and human bonds come with a whole lot of trouble. First, they needed a way to communicate, something that worked, not just another pointless meeting. It felt less like some cold mission and more like a fun visit or a school trip. People showed up to laugh, learn, and soak up knowledge. And that's how he'd start racking up results like crazy. Mew steps in and blurts out that it was a brilliant idea, because if anyone can crack this, it's her and Momoka. It was a huge relief for everyone nearby to finally know each other, because it could stop a whole lot of future trouble before it even started. But the Lilligard barrier doesn't let you pass freely. There are nasty restrictions, and for a second Mew just hesitates, then she decides to roll with it. She'd figure out a way to hide this whole mess from the residents, then they could finally pull the two islands closer together. And yeah, friends are friends, so Momoka knew she had to head to the village school and tell them. And she'd toss the rest to Misaki and Yuta, daring them to handle it. The two of them lean in, grin, and wish them good luck before they take off. Good luck, Yuta, seriously, thanks for jumping in and helping me. Ship rips out of Ligard and rockets straight toward Ayaga. Both the parents and the kids were buzzing with excitement. Thanks to Mew, everyone pulled off the sneakiest entry, right onto the. On that island, everyone finally packed together. Now it was time to kick off the excursion, but something was about to go terribly wrong. It was stressing Utah like crazy. Those winds were brutal and they would not let up. Ayaga School throws open its doors and welcomes the Lilgard School with open arms. Everyone slowly realizes it. Sure, they're from another world, but they're basically just like them, and then the head teacher finally hands the floor to Utah, which has Misaki and Exiled feeling a little uneasy. The whole point of that visit was simple. Both schools had to meet, talk, and start real interactions, so the kids start chattering about their families, and suddenly the whole room feels alive. And little by little, they realize their lives aren't as different as they thought. They're more alike than they ever imagined. Misaki says things are going perfectly, and Exiled chimes in that she couldn't help but think the Japanese kids are adorable. But the adults kept backing away, refusing to get any closer. Yeah, because they were from a whole different world, so they figured right away this connection wasn't going to feel natural at all. Yuta scrambles to figure out a plan to pull the two sides together. Then out of nowhere, lunch. The bell rings, and that tiny sound pushes them closer than ever. Sitting at the same table with a stranger always broke the ice and made the whole conversation finally click. But he still had to squeeze in one last little push. If only these two could finally meet in the middle and come together more. Days flew by and the students finally snapped into motion, grabbing brooms and wiping down the school. Until someone finally calls out what Fiera is doing with that mop. Mopping the floor was his job. She wasn't supposed to be doing it, but she had no idea that every task had its own assigned person. The boy hands her a damp cloth, then whips Fiera into action. Go clean the tables. But the girl freaks out. Touch that and she's toast. Then Utah shows up fast and orders Takaru to stop right there mid-action. And when she finally spots the teacher, he's bursting with joy and practically blurts out that Fiera had a condition. Takaru just couldn't wrap his head around it. Because of her blood, the moment she got splashed with water, she'd snap into a new form, and only a tiny handful of people had any idea. But he couldn't explain it right then, so he begged them to switch tasks, only for the boy to refuse coldly, like he wasn't budging an inch. When he goes to question her, he bumps right into a bucket by accident, and suddenly he's staring at Fiera's legs, then his scales. He shouts here like it fixes everything. Then the panic hits hard as he starts bombarding the question, is Fiera okay? But the moment she spotted those scales, she slipped into a full-blown trance. She screams in pure despair, and then this happens. This snaps Misaki and Exilea's focus, because what she's terrified of is finally happening, and it can't be. Takaru calls her name, yanking her attention right back into it. She couldn't keep screaming like that in school anymore. But the fear hits Fiera hard, and before she can stop herself, she unleashes her power. Alright, you've got to step up and beg her to stop right at those doors. But it was already over. Fiera whipped all the water right back at Takaru. Utah grabs her tight, and the girl freezes mid-stride. But the damage was already done. Takara was drenched, completely soaked through. The adults show up in a flash, and Vera bolts the moment fear claws at her. Year after year, and just when things finally felt steady, Utah got hit with one of the worst nightmares imaginable. Then it hits, everyone jumps in, scrambles to clean up the chaos side by side. And the kids' conversation was flashing all the warning signs. They were all whispering that a tsunami had slammed into Takaru, and Misaki couldn't stop shaking with worry. In the principal's office, Takaru's mother was demanding answers, voice sharp and unrelenting. The principal barked at her to calm down, but she snapped back, demanding to know how her son got hurt like that. Under the weight of the pressure, Utah snapped into an apology and admitted he'd let everyone down as a supervisor. She asks about the water magic, but he blurts that Takaru had slipped. That only lit her mother's rage even hotter, and she couldn't fathom what the school was thinking when they invited them in the first place. Now it didn't matter. She refused to let any dangerous soul near her son, and she was done backing down, no matter what. She prayed they'd come back to Lilgard soon, then begged they'd never leave again. Utah clocked that Takara was embarrassed, but Takara didn't say a word. The boy's father blurts out an apology, because his wife just bulldozed him with harsh, intense words. But he finally got what she meant. If that was magic, then yeah, fear of getting hurt would hit them, and they couldn't just ignore that danger. For now, they'd better keep their distance, because Utah feels utterly crushed. Slumped on the couch, he sighs and regrets it, because that was the perfect chance to bring them closer. Exiled bursts into the room in total panic, crying that she was rounding up the kids to bring them back. She spun around, but Fiera was nowhere in sight. The wind along the coast kept roaring louder and louder. Yuta meets Mizuki and she tells him straight up she's already scoured a bunch of places and still hasn't found a trace of fear. Yuta then gets this spark and decides to go check by the sea. And just like that, he spots her sitting on one of the barriers. Yuta calls out to her she's the one he's been hunting for, and he finally finds her. He tries to move in, telling her he's just relieved she's safe, then she stops him dead and tells him, "Don't come any closer." That place was pure danger for her, yet Fira refused to retreat. She spiraled into thinking she'd ruined everything for the teacher and the whole class, but it simply wasn't true. It was his duty to cut Takeru off, while Fiera just wanted to dodge the hole. The water hit and it was an accident, plain and simple. Everything was supposed to be fine. They only had to make it back to Lilgard, but Fiera slammed that idea down because she knew she'd already wrecked their shot at getting any closer. Yuta is left reeling in pure shock. Exactly for that reason, she couldn't even bring herself to look at him. With tears streaming down her face, she blurts non-stop apologies like she can't make it right fast enough. Even as a little kid, she was already fretting over grown-up problems like it was weighing her down by the hour. Yuta cracks a joke to break the tension, says it doesn't bother him at all, and then tells the girl to remember exactly what she did the last time they were together. Back then, life was either a wild, daring adventure or it meant nothing at all. When you ask for the quotes, Fiera snaps back with the author's name, Helen Keller. So yeah, she still had one more shot at that adventure, and he tried to make it happen, but it all fell apart anyway. But that didn't stop him. He'd fire back and try again, because even if he failed, this wasn't the end of the road. So he had to know, would she be able to help him next time? Time drags by and then boom, Fiera finally locks eyes with him. And Yuta says it's time to head home, like the night's done with them. She wipes the tears off her face, then springs back to her feet like she refuses to break. If she said yes, she'd step in and help him without a doubt. Fierce gust whips through the air, and a brutal wave slams in out of nowhere. Yuta was right there, staring us in the face. She gets yanked off her feet and dragged under by the raging sea. He starts yelling for Fear by name, panicking like his world is slipping away. Until he catches sight of a dark shape lurking beneath the water. The girl lay unconscious beneath the waves, drifting in the raging sea. And still way too far from shore, he finally spots her, a mermaid, but she isn't fighting or swimming at all. She's out cold, unconscious, and somehow he has to believe she'll be fine. If she ever lost her way, we'd be in big trouble. He rockets into the city and heads straight to the fishermen on the island. Then Yuta blurts out that one of the kids is from Lilgard had plunged into the sea and everyone was screaming for help to pull her back, so they asked Yuta, will she be alive? And he snapped, yeah, she's turned into part sea creature. And one of the guys blurts out, so it was the kid who heard it right. Yamato's wife told him there was a kid in town who could use water magic. The moment they hear it, they realize it's that kid, and suddenly caution tightens in their gut. But Yuta had no choice, everything had fallen on him, and that kid's fate was on his shoulders. And to save her, he had to beg for their help. The chief demanded he lift his head, and he admitted he'd normally help, but a storm was rolling in, and they couldn't gamble with that risk. If the kid managed to crawl out alive from the sea, she could fire up magic and pull herself back from the brink. Back because if a fisherman didn't scoop that kid out, it'd be a straight-up crime. But then boom, another world cracked open in front of them, blazing with magic and dragons. And yeah, he nailed it, things were different, but they still couldn't just lean on magic to solve everything. Even then, Fira didn't turn into some legend. She stayed a totally normal kid, just like the rest. He finally understood why the people of Ayago wouldn't help. They were terrified, and fear kept them from stepping in. But he refused to quit. Then he bolts across the deck like he's racing fate itself. Even with a captain's license in hand, he still couldn't rent a boat. If only Momoka were here with me. Right in the middle of everything, someone shouts his name. He whips around and bam, it's Hamada, staring him straight in the face. He throws out a quick apology for earlier, then leans in like, so what's Yuta gonna do? Because come on, would they really hand him a boat if the sea looks like that? The moment they start arguing, Hamada grabs the brakes. He refuses to let him march out into the sea. But Yuta couldn't just abandon Fira floating there. Locking eyes with that young man's iron determination, he steps in and stops him from going any further. He promises they'll use his boat. Yuta was right, he couldn't abandon a child. So they had to sprint to safety, because wasting a second could cost them everything. They finally crashed into the spot where the boat was anchored, and Yuta can't believe it, this boat, it's actually good. While all this was happening, Masaki and Exilia showed up too, already geared up to jump in and help. You mean they let him go alone? No way. Masaki had already gotten used to it, Exilia though. But even so, she couldn't stay, because as the princess of Lilgard she had to leave, and Yuta had already done too much for her to ignore. Because she was his princess and wife, she vowed to help track down Fiora. Yuta feels completely out of place, and then the girl flashes him a grin. Amada shouts that the boat has finally started moving. They had to climb up right away, or everything would slip out of reach. Isiki and Exilia were practically bouncing with excitement. But the second they step out, the two of you spot Takeru waiting on the pier. Since he was so far off, he couldn't be sure, but if it was him, his mother would already be spiraling with worry. Exilia whips around out of nowhere and yells a warning. There's a massive wave crashing straight for them. The boat jolts hard and swerves as the impact hits, sending everyone into a wild, breathless stumble. Isiki can't stop worrying about the princess, but at the absolute last second, Yuta manages to hold on. Everyone's grinning, breathing easy at last because they're safe until the story cuts off. Cecilia grabs Yuta's attention and thanks him for standing by her. Moda suddenly blurts out, if we end up in the sea, it's instant game over, so the three of them cling on for dear life. They keep pushing forward, battling the brutal winds and crashing waves with pure grit. The sea turned savage and the boat thrashed violently as the waves kept slamming it. So bad it even made Yuta feel like it was stuck on a ship, swaying till the world spun. Even with the lanterns lighting the way, the waves still towered like monsters. Yuta knew it would be rough, but hunting her in that sea felt impossible, like finding one grain of sand in the desert. Then, just when it seemed hopeless, he finally spots a silhouette. Berverine, Ruaru, and Myron dove into the search side by side. After telling them everything, they rushed in to help. Exilia asks if anyone else showed up, but the others won't answer because they're terrified of Fiere's magic. He tried to strike up a conversation with the other fishermen, but He kept firing question after question, and when the truth finally had to come out, he braced for whatever punishment waited him later. But first he had one mission on his mind: track down his daughter. Cecilia tells him, breathe, stay calm, this is her kingdom, not a place where he has to beg, and they'll find her together. They were all fired up about how they were gonna go hunting. When Iaga's office drops the call on them, Miu tells Takeru that he stole a boat and vanished out into the open sea. According to his mother, the boy snapped that it was all his fault, not hers. We went after you, only now they're adrift with not one kid but two. Suddenly Momoka lunges and snatches Miu's radio. She screams so loud it leaves everyone ringing in their ears. It's way better if they track those kids down fast because everyone's giving it everything, and she refuses to stand around doing nothing. So she unleashed the government boats and set them loose onto the open sea. Soon the help would finally kick in. Exilia blares a warning, ships are closing in fast. And when they finally step outside, they spot multiple boats racing straight toward them. Yuta's eyes widen when he spots Barog standing right up front. Ruaru was one of his best clients, and he refused to let a friend down, so now it was time to prove to everyone watching exactly what they could do. Misaki admits the truth and warns that a missing Japanese kid was out there too. Barog bursts into laughter, like he's dying to admit he might secretly hate Japan. But he'd never leave a kid floating out there, something that shocks Yuta and leaves him grinning with joy. No matter what chaos hit them, they vowed to save both kids together. Lilgard had been crushed for far too long. Now it was time to burn the chains off and show everyone exactly what they're capable of. Exilia beams, and you can see it hit her hard. She's genuinely moved by everything that's happening. She suddenly hit on a plan: mermaids can pull ships right to them. Anytime Fiera opened her mouth to sing, the ships would get pulled toward her like magnets. If they wanted more ships, it'd be way easier for one of them to fall for the other, and they could even use light magic to make it happen. She storms onto the deck, readies herself, and sets her plan in motion, painting a message across the sky like a warning meant for everyone. U2 suddenly sparks an idea to help too. Marin told everyone to lock in their attention, then split up, and if you spot either of them, you call Marin right away. The countdown to the search began right out in the middle of the sea, two kids crammed into a tiny boat, holding on for dear life as they sailed. They tried to talk, but magic was the only way through. Fiera still hadn't mastered enough Japanese, though she did know a few life-saving keywords. So she fires back, "Why are you even here?" And the boy shoots back, "I came to help." She thanks him on the spot, but Takiri couldn't let it go. He had to know why she was struggling to live as a mermaid. He scrambles to hide, but he's already closing in. She says she doesn't have to, but he's still desperate to be able to transform himself too. Now it finally clicked. She'd tried so hard not to get wet earlier, because he had no idea what could happen if she did. So he decided it was time to apologize for what happened earlier, and Fiera shot one back too because she'd heard everything. Takaru shrugs it off like it's fine, just a scratch, because for a guy like him, getting a bandage is basically an honor. But she was totally baffled. She just couldn't wrap her head around what he was saying. Suddenly, a blinding light erupts across the sky, snatching both of their attention in the same instant. Exilia pushed herself to shape a sentence in the sky bit by bit until it started to take form slowly. And the light finally snapped into a clear shape. And then they spotted that sign. Sierra's instincts finally clicked into place. Suddenly, the light shuts off, then snaps back to its usual size around the boat. For now, they kept moving with zero news, and that silence was terrifying because Fira might have never even seen it. The light was so dim that nothing was clear. If only their light burned brighter. Exilia suddenly crumples to her knees, and Utah rushes to her side. Her magic hit the wall and ran out. They couldn't sit there, they had to make something happen, and soon. Until a voice finally slices through the silence. Momoka finally rolled in with reinforcements. She whips every light toward the boat, blasting its way through the dark. If they wanted brightness, then by the gods they'd get light. Blinding, earth-shaking glow erupts above the ship, restoring Exilia and Utah's shattered hopes. She summons the spirits of light and blasts her magic into the air for help. And once again, a strange glow flares across the sky. From where the kids stood, they could see it all clearly. There was only one explanation. The sensei and the princess had done it. Thus right then, Fira's eyes widen as it hits her. She finally starts to understand. And those letters were basically begging her to sing, like right now. If she's saying it, then those boats are going to spot them. She refused to drag any trouble down on her family. When she sang, it hit like a curse. People couldn't help but fall into heartbreak. Hakaru didn't get any of it at first, until her singing started to feel like a curse. Why would you drag her up to sing right now, in the middle of all this chaos? That totally blindsided Fira. She'd never seen it that way before, yet Takaru kept going, saying that at times like this, the only thing you should think about is making others happy. So she had to trust him with everything, and then belt out that song with all the power in her lungs. If she did it, everyone would finally be smiling. She just had to believe, because everything hinged on it. And with that, she steels her nerves and decides she's going to sing. Fira dashes to the tip of the tiny boat and unleashes her voice into the air. Little by little, the boats creeping nearby started closing the distance, leaving the sailors scrambling as they lost control of the rudders. Hamada jerks his head up and warns everyone that one of the boats has gone dead. No response at all. Then Yuta grabs him and orders him to follow, right as Misaki suddenly spots something lurking in the sea. Fira and Takaru were crammed together in a rowboat, drifting toward whatever danger waited next. Takaru yells at Hamada to stop, but he can't. This current's a monster, and they're seconds from smashing into the wall. Arag was struggling too. He couldn't steer the boat, and it kept slipping out of his control. Cecilia tells everyone, "I'll handle the wind magic, I'll help." But Yuta snaps at her to rest, because she's already burned through way too much magic. Then boom, an absolutely monstrous wave crashes into the scene out of nowhere, leaving everyone shattered and crushed. Suddenly, Yuta locks in on it. Lilgard's boats aren't metal at all, they're built from wood. So he could finally tap into earth magic. He snapped orders to the sailors, warned them exactly what was coming, and then begged the earth spirit for help. A brand new route starts snapping into place, steering straight toward the children. And it latches onto their boat like a nightmare, and Utah barks at them to scramble up fast. Both of them were shaking with pure terror. But the wave kept surging closer and he scrambled. He pushed his earth magic harder than ever. But his power completely died out. So he rockets off the boat, hurling himself straight onto the kids' boat. They're stunned to spot him in the boat, like, how is he even here? And then it's time to head home. But with the boat slamming and pitching, the whole route gets wrecked. So he told them, "Grab me with everything you've got, and no matter what happens, don't let go." Momoka and Masaki spot it, and panic instantly hits. He never knew how to be like his father, but he refused to give up. He'd find a way. Even if it meant giving up his own life, he'd still tear through the danger to save those children. Suddenly, Exilia snaps out a loud call and grabs his attention. No way she was letting that wave snag him. She'd never allow it. He unleashes the magic and he grips on tight. She gets pinned in an instant, then she yanks hard and all three crash together. The moment they step into the boat, a monster wave crashes down and shatters the calm. The three crash onto the deck, bracing as the whole ship rocks under their feet. Takaru stared in shock at the impossible reality. Somehow they were alive, and Yuta's certainty hit like a truck. He was not about to throw his life away. Back at the Japanese school, things started to heat up fast. The whole visit got slammed shut, cancelled for good. And there was zero way to stop it. No tricks, no escape, just acceptance. So if they finally tried talking to their parents, they might have gotten another chance, but even after they cooperated, the whole vibe still felt cold and out of reach. At U2 size, it was going to be a nightmare to deal with. Zaku kicks things off by talking about his family. He tells you his father was a dwarf and that he'd snap at the drop of a hat, rage bubbling over fast. And his mother was always starving. Suddenly, laughter erupts from the crowd. And it hit them hard, like maybe they weren't so different after all. In that instant, Utah and Exilia couldn't stop smiling. Pure happiness hits them both. His father always rocked an eye patch, and he couldn't help but love it like it was the coolest thing he'd ever seen. When he finally asked, he snapped back that he'd gotten it while fighting to protect it. Long ago, their village got smashed by a pack of ogres. Because his father was built like a tank, he steamrolled through a whole bunch of them. But the worst part, he didn't just lose a little, he got wiped out and several of his companions fell with him. While he was out saving people, this monster's hunt ended with him stumbling upon a place he could finally call home. My mom was convinced we'd die there. Suddenly, screams roar down the hallway, and Zaku's mom and dad burst into the classroom. He lights up with joy when he sees them, then slips right back into reading his story, right as his mother had begged the gods for protection. Brog lunges to step in, but his wife snaps at him to stay quiet. Then his father spots the ogre's location and completely loses it, because it's even bigger than their entire house. Even then, his father didn't flinch. He swore he'd protect both of them, squared up, and launched straight into the ogre's attack. His father lost one eye in that battle, and his mother crowned him a hero, while Exilia glowed with pride, hanging on every word of the story. And Zaku's parents were too. As soon as the boy was done, he shot out a call for his father like he couldn't wait 1 second longer. He swallowed his pride and apologized for daring to tell the story without asking permission first. But he couldn't stop smiling, being their son meant everything, so he just wanted to thank them. The whole crowd erupted into applause for the family. It felt like this story pulled everyone in the room together like magnets, and that was seriously awesome. At last, they finally smashed through and reached the exact place they'd been chasing. Suddenly, Brog slid up to them, clearly a little awkward, like he was fighting the urge to blurt out the thing he couldn't hold back. His wife tapped his shoulder to calm him down, and he quickly blurted out an apology. He's itching to jump into the school project. He came back to make things right for what he'd said before, and this visit finally opened his eyes to how much a school matters. Exilia and Utah practically exploded with joy when they heard. And yeah, right there they'd already turned into sea partners, fully locked in as they rescued them. I'd be thrilled to team up with him again. Isaki beamed because somehow it all worked out just like she hoped. Dakaru's mother lit up with pure gratitude. But wait, she had one more amazing bit of news to drop on me. Mew stepped up and told him the government was coming in hot, determined to protect this area. So now he'd have to jump in and help Momoka with all the admin stuff. Turn into pure red tape from here on out. Suddenly, Fiera came straight up to them, grinning, and announced she had a gift. She'd handcrafted a shell herself as thanks. She wanted to know if she could be his lover starting now, then Utah snapped, absolutely refusing. No, and she didn't stop there, she even crafted a shell for the princess herself. Exilia didn't even pause, she snapped the brooch onto her clothes, and Masaki immediately grinned that the three of them looked like a real family from the outside. Momoka dove right into the chaos and blurted out, "Yeah, that's Misaki's. Honestly, for ages, her little sister wouldn't stop crushing on you." Masaki cut her sister off before she could even finish her sentence. Suddenly, Ververine burst onto the scene. Her sudden pop-ins always sent chills down his spine. She claimed that when he asked Exilia to marry him, he disrespected her by doing so. Mere women asterisk Masaki and Momoka, Mew, and even a young mermaid. So that's it, she's going to track him down, right here, no delays. Utah bolted the moment he turned to face her, and that's the final beat of this story. And with that, our story slams shut right here. If you enjoyed this, smash that like button.